And I'm live. Hello, all. So normally Peter's the one who says and we're live, but apparently he's having some technical issues, and I don't want to wait too long because our first guest is here, and I'm excited about that. So yeah, they're having some technical issues. So I'm going to start. Welcome. It is Monday. Tuesday. Well, it's Monday's generational change that we're doing on Tuesdays is 4th of July. That's why I'm used to saying that. So it's generational change. It's Tuesday. I'm Jen. Peter's not here. Hopefully he'll come in any minute now. And we have a really good show happening today. So we're going to be talking first with Senator Gustavo Rivera. He is a New York State senator and is the person who is sponsoring the New York Health Act. And he's been on the show before, but right now, obviously, we're seeing more and more rights diminish. So I want to check in and see how that fight is going. And then after that, we're going to be talking with the Vanguard guys and just, we haven't had them on in a while and just seeing what's up with those guys. It's always a fun conversation. So that's where that's where we're headed. And I see there's already comments. Jesse Ventura 2024, Marxist bros and generational change. Well, I don't know the Marxist bros. Are you talking about the Marx brothers? Sorry. So anyway, I'm going to invite Gustavo on because hopefully, and Peter will join because we have a lot to talk about and I don't want him to be wasting his time. So without any further ado, welcome to Gustavo Rivera. Hi.
It is not a waste of time to be with you, my friend. So no wasted time here.
Thank you so much. Welcome to Generational Change. It's good to have you back.
Good to be back.
And I just want to remind people, we had recently a healthcare panel and Gustavo was going to be joining us and then was not able to. And we were able to get a really good stand-in from the state of New York to talk about what's going on there. But there's nothing as good as the real thing. So I'm glad you were able to be on here now because what is the current status? What is going on there? Because I think when we first talked with you, it was right after, I want to say, was it before or after Cuomo resigned?
After who resigned? I forgot who that is. No, obviously, I didn't. I don't. I'll be really honest with you. I mean, just the madness of the last not only couple of weeks, but couple of months, has scrambled my brain, and this is even on top of pandemic, post-pandemic brain. So I don't remember exactly when it is that we were on, but it is possible. If I had a big smile on my face, it probably was just about the time that Cuomo had resigned. So that's how you can tell. Go back on that video. And if I'm I don't know, breaking out in dances in my room, etc., just randomly, that's probably around when it was. But where we are right now, well, we in New York State, we have our legislative session is from January through June. So technically, we finished our session a couple of weeks ago. As some folks might know, just this last week, we were called back to Albany for a special session to deal with both on issues of gun violence as well as issues of choice. And we passed a slew of bills related to gun reform, to gun violence, around keeping. Making sure that 18-year-olds can't purchase assault rifles and expansions of background checks, a couple of other things like that. And then on issues of choice, we passed for the first time what we have to do another time before it goes to the public, which is a constitutional amendment to enshrine the right of abortion in the New York State Constitution. So we passed both of those things and this week. So as it relates specifically to the New York Health Act, well, first we should talk about this. The somewhat sad thing is that we have that Dick Gottfried will no longer be in the assembly. Dick Gottfried is my colleague in the assembly, who has been the chair of the health committee for longer than many of the listeners and watchers have been alive. He was in the legislature for 52 years, just retired, and he was a great. He was a great mentor to me, and he certainly has earned his retirement, and he is doing it in his own terms. And even right to the end, he was still an effective legislator. I'm going to miss him in my battles next year. But where we are is that we are working to make sure that we have a couple of good colleagues stay with us, maybe get some better colleagues in the legislature so that we can fight again on next year. That's the short version.
Right. Where do you think you are in terms of this governor? I mean, now it's just so you definitely know what you would have expected if Cuomo was sitting there and this even got through. Like, like how that would go. It was pretty defeatist.
Yeah.
She seems like more of a wild card.
Well, the first thing that we have to know about Kathy Hochul is she's not a sociopath. That's a very low bar, but she is not a sociopath, which is a good thing. But I think that, listen, I think that a wild card is right. There are folks both in her administration as well as her that are open to some things that Cuomo was never open to. And I will give her credit where credit is due. There have been conversations ongoing, even when we've disagreed on some issues, that have been far more it's somebody that you can actually govern with. She is obviously not as progressive or as liberal as some of us, and we're going to have to push her on some things. There's the two things that are kind of at top of mind for me, because they're both my pieces of legislation and things I care deeply about. One is the New York Health Act, right, to secure healthcare to every single New Yorker, regardless of their age or their race or their wealth or their immigration status, and also overdose prevention centers. And these are places that there's two of these spots that are operating in the city of New York right now. They're the only ones in the country that are operating, and we need them in the rest of the state. These are places where people who use drugs can actually use them under medical supervision. It's a following the modality of harm reduction. It is something that saves lives every single day, gives these folks opportunities to be able to recover, because you can't recover if you're not alive. And and I mentioned both of those things because there are people within the administration that the governor has chosen who are supportive of both of these. And therefore, you have people inside the administration that can then advise the governor on why they are supportive of these things, why they approach them the way that they do. And I am hoping that this will certainly soften up. And I think that there's some instances in which she has shown that she is open to these things, but we haven't gotten any strong commitments still. But she's in the middle of, re-election. So this is certainly the time to demand such things from her. And I know that I will be doing that in the months to come. And certainly when I return next year, even though I have a primary, but
you'll get it.
Yeah, we'll get there. But I'm very, I think that you're correct that she is a wild card. But the one thing that I can underline is that I believe that she's someone that we can get there, that we can, she's not a sociopath. She's not going to try to destroy you or your family or everything you've ever lived, everything you've ever loved. She's not going to do that.
I think it's very interesting how you bring up both the Health Act and the drugs and the addiction issues, because that is a health issue, and it should have always been a health issue. It's not a criminal issue. It's a health issue. So to me, those go together very in the same point. Like, that's a health concern. So
we certainly agree. This is a public health crisis, and we cannot, I've said it a billion times. I'm not the only one that said it, but we cannot arrest our way out of an overdose crisis. We just can't. And the proof of that has been the decades that the war on drugs has been ongoing. And we've just thought that maybe we just arrest enough people that either use or sell drugs and we're going to get rid of it. We don't. And harm reduction, for folks who might not be familiar with that modality, starts with the assumption that you treat people who use drugs as people first. You don't treat them as addicts or fiends or things that you kind of push to the side. All of that dehumanizing language actually leads to policy which just thinks of these folks as disposable, that you need to push them to the side. Harm reduction starts with the notion these are people who use drugs. They must be treated with respect and dignity. And the fact is that when you do that, you get to actually talk to a person. You get to figure out why they're using and hopefully put them on a track to get better. And that's something that certainly arresting people doesn't do. And so, and again, I believe that this administration is open to that. Both the health commissioner at the state level, as well as the commissioner of the agency that deals with addiction and substance abuse issues, are both supporters, publicly have been before both the Health Act and on overdose prevention centers. So we have two people who are experts within her administration who can advise her, because she'll hear from me. I'm like, it's my bill, so obviously I want it to pass. But what I'm telling them is, you don't need my bill. just do an executive order, we can get these things to actually function. And she's got people inside the administration that can advise her on that.
Gee, imagine that, somebody in the executive office having executive privilege. A foreign concept, Jen. I didn't know that the governor or the president could actually do that. But hey, you learn something new every day.
So Peter's here for anybody who didn't notice that he popped in finally.
You know how it goes.
So yeah, so Peter's here. Everybody, say yay!
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 Hello! Well,
I did it. Did you see me open, and you couldn't just get in, or what happened?
Why don't the people of New York have health care? Kramer, tell me. I mean, it goes without saying.
I guess he was just stuck behind all these doors.
Yeah.
Stuck. He just couldn't get him open.
You know, come on. Gustavo knows everything about Seinfeld. It's New York life. I mean, it could just basically be like a Larry David, Jerry conversation about why don't people have health care? But it's true. And, we obviously wanted to also talk to you about the elections.
Yeah.
It goes without saying that this really is a bottom-up approach. Like we talked about the last time you were on, the value of AOC is not on Capitol Hill. It's in New York City. The things that have been done to galvanize so many of these city council representatives, assembly members that have been winning their races. The higher races are obviously a lot higher to obtain. And of course, in the case of the governor's race, we saw that the progressives, even though they finished in second, were not able to get anywhere near the governor's seat just yet. But I think over time that's going to change, because the more we bring in these non-corporate progressive legislators at all levels of New York government, that is going to make a significant difference. And that is how eventually we get to the New York Health Act passing in Albany. Your thoughts on that?
I absolutely agree there. And it makes me a little sick to my stomach to say what I'm about to say, but it's the truth. We should take more than a few pages from the conservative handbook. The reason why we have the tragic decisions that we've had the last couple of weeks from this Supreme Court is because 30, 40, 50 years ago, Republicans started to figure out that they needed to be long-term thinkers. Like, how do we actually put our people, I'm going to say ours because I don't want to tie myself to that, but you understand what I'm saying? They said, how do we put folks that believe the same things that we believe in positions of power so that they can make decisions that will impact, further down the road? And that means that they started electing people to the school board 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. They started figuring out whenever they could name judges. So they put judges on track to become judges that could potentially become part of the Supreme Court. So we have to think long-term that way. Like, we have to. And so empowering folks, one of the things, by the way, that I think is also incredibly valuable as far as AOC is concerned, and one of the things that I'm such a fan of what she does, is that she has been able to move the Overton window over almost by sheer force of will. Like, there is a connection that she has to an entire generation of people who might be disconnected from politics. She has the ability and and just the willingness to explain things, to be able to connect with folks. It's like, I wish that I had, that I had gotten here. I mean, because I've been here. I'm an old guy. I am, I am the crotchety uncle, I call myself, of the progressive left. Like, I've been here. This is my 12th freaking year in legislative office. Stay off my lawn and all that. So somebody like I never had the connection that she has in social media circles to be able to say, like, hey, look at how we prepare for a legislative hearing. Look at what I do on a day-to-day basis to serve my constituency, to do this. And all of that is about, like, kind of in the long term, getting people to understand the process, but also to kind of change the perspective on what is possible in public policy, what is necessary, certainly, but what is possible, right? Because there's always, those two things are always competing with each other. The things that we actually need, but that's never going to happen in real life. Like, so, okay, but how do we get them closer and closer together? And I do think that her constant presence in public discussions about sort of these issues around energy, around healthcare, around taxation, et cetera, can and do move the needle. And these conversations obviously help as well.
I agree. This is totally like a non sequitur, but what was your life before you got dragged into the 12 years of vortex that you've been in? Were you a teacher? Weirdly enough, I've been a professor. I've been a college professor since '99. I got to New York
So very quickly, born in Puerto Rico, raised there, got to New York in 98 to do a PhD in political science. But you'll notice that you don't put a PhD next to my name down here. So that's because I've never really got done. I'm technically still a PhD student, but I started teaching college in 99, and I never intended to run for anything. For me, it was I started doing politics as an operative, like getting folks elected and learning kind of the operational aspect of, particularly of campaigns and field and how to, put canvases together and how to put talking points together, that sort of stuff. And it was just so my work before was in public service as well, but it was doing it behind the scenes. And in 2000 and it was long ago, 2009, when the whole entire coup happened in the New York State Senate. And kids, as I said, stay off my lawn. Let me tell you how it used to be. In my day, two freaking people that called themselves Democrats joined the Republicans, threw the entire state Senate into a disarray and a coup that gave the Republicans power back. And that inspired, I said, I got to do something about this dude. And so I chopped off his head. Not literally, of course. But I defeated him in 2010. That was a guy named Pedro Espada. And defeated him in 2010, and I've been here ever since, and have been able to keep my sanity during this whole time, and my focus, and enough that I spent 8 years in the minority. 8 years in the minority, and I tell everybody, being in the minority in the New York State Legislature, if you don't care, it's the sweetest job in the universe. Because you get an audible next to your name, you get a parking placard, you always have a place to sit in any event that you go to, but you're not responsible for anything. So if you don't care, it's like, yay! If you care, it is immensely frustrating. I spent 8 years doing that, and then I spent the last 3 years in the majority. And there's also frustrations that come with being in the majority. That being said, I have passed a bunch of bills that I'm incredibly proud of. I've been able to change policy conversations, been able to resist when the last governor tried to cut Medicaid in so many different ways. So I'm in the place where I need to be.
We're speaking with State Senator Gustavo Rivera of New York's 33rd District. Obviously, the New York Health Act is the order of the day, especially with Roe v. Wade being overturned. Now this becomes even more of a central focus. One of the things Jen and I were talking about earlier is the nonprofit industrial complex. It is a huge cog in the equation. When people think about some of the issues that we deal with here in Florida, even in blue states like New York, it is a huge problem. There are factions on the left, blue, Democratic side, whatever you want to call it, that are actually in the way of the New York Health Act getting passed. And if it was passed, there wouldn't be a need for all of these nonprofits saying, we're going to protect your right to choose. No, actually, if you had universal health care, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Can you please speak on that?
But it is true that what we're trying to do is something that is fundamentally changing the way that we deliver healthcare, not only in the state of New York, but hopefully providing a model for the rest of the country. Now, obviously, it is not something that hasn't happened before, because basically, as Uncle Bernie tells us all the time, and everybody knows, basically every modern democracy in the world has a version of guaranteed health care for their citizens, right? And so we're in the state of New York, we're trying to do something that is fundamentally changing the way that, at least in the United States, it is assumed that is the way that it needs to be done. And therefore, we bump into what I call the bird in the hand problem. It's like we have, like, for example, in the case of some folks in the labor unions, labor sector, there is some public sector unions who legitimately are saying, well, we've got this, we've negotiated for this, we've got a better health insurance package than most folks, and we've bled for it, and we've given up raises to be able to get that, and all of that is legitimate. What I'm telling them is, first of all, I want you to let the bread go, because you want to kill it, and more importantly, we're going to create a system which creates a higher floor for everybody, including your members, that, among other things, has long-term care baked into it, which is something that no health insurance product, regardless of which one it is, that you negotiated for, has. But getting people to make that transition is a very, very tough thing to do. Remember when we talked about the Overton window? this notion that this is just not the way it's done, right? The way it's done is you figure out how to get the best job you can to get the best type of insurance that you can. That notion that at the center of whether you get healthcare or not and the quality of the healthcare that you get is all about the insurance that you get. That is something that is pervasive and very hard to break. And so you have folks who are just resistant to the idea because they just can't think that it can be done a different way. And that's difficult, bro. That is difficult to break.
Yeah. We've had Wendell Potter on the show a couple of times, and just from, he's great. And just from his experience and hearing what he has to say, everything you're saying about that mentality that's hard to break through is very purposeful by design, and years and millions of dollars of money, so that we do believe that, and we're fearful of anybody saying anything that would threaten that norm. Yeah. And it's very intentional. And that's it. So it's like it's fighting such a, brainwashing that we've had since probably, the 70s. Like, how long has it been since like the healthcare issue has been like in its current state? Peter, are you aware of that? I want to say it was like Nixon era, and they were talking about starting to get money for friends in the insurance industry, or like it goes back. There was something very nefarious.
Anything terrible that started is probably Nixon or Reagan, one of the two. It happened,
I can't remember if it was me or not, but I can assure you what I did was not very good. And but again, there is sort of this, we're in this trap in many ways. One of the things that New York actually does do well, extremely well, I have to say, I can't speak for the National Working Families Party because I have a number of issues with them, but the New York Working Families Party is excellent. And Robert Buonaspina, who's a friend, I'm sure you know him, what they do to help non-corporate candidates and especially try to alleviate a lot of these problems, I really think speaks a great deal as to expanding the electorate, because I really think that that's what we are really trying to do right now. I even find that just being down here and going to networking events that have nothing to do with politics, it's amazing how many like-minded people you can meet, getting out of those regular circles that everybody's just so accustomed to. So something as simple as dealing with this issue right now regarding abortion and recognizing that there is a religious element to it, but it's a lot more nefarious than people think, because I'm from New Jersey. You're obviously in New York. We come from the most densely Catholic concentrated population in the country, and everybody wants to throw slings and arrows in our direction, saying that it's really on us. No, this is much more deeply rooted than that. But I'm curious what it's been like being in the New York environment where the Catholic population is extremely strong and more or less in a very blue area, where they stand on this issue, if they've been vocal in any regard as far as that goes.
Well, there's some parallel here. When a few years ago, back in 2011, we passed marriage equality in the state of New York. And I remember that there were a few places in my district, and I tell this story all the time because it's part of it. It kind of gives context to the work that we do as public servants. It's like I voted for marriage equality, did so proudly, had a very good reason to do so. And there were some churches who disinvited me from ever visiting again. None of them were Catholic, though, which is weird. So they were Christian, but I mentioned that to say that while some of them did kind of speak up and say like that's terrible, and I explained to them that even though they might disagree with me on this one, that if they didn't want to invite me to their home, that's fine. I still represented them, and if they wanted to invite me, I would tell them why I did it. And if they felt that I could no longer be supported because I made this one decision, then that was on, I'll respect that, and that was on them. But during that time, it was, I was going to make the decision that I made regardless, but I was weary. I was like, all right, so what's going to happen now as far as backlash from communities that I represent? A lot of Latinos, and there's like this perception that Latinos are just overall conservative, since many of the countries that they come from, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, Central America, Mexico, etc., are deeply, deeply religious and Catholic, that there would be that resistance. But the fact is that for the most part, at least in my personal experience, that pushback has not really been that heavily there. I think that there is an understanding. There certainly are some of the more deeply conservative folks who are just kind of like, well, this is about, they're killing babies, and they stop, right? But I have not found that the majority of people have that situation, particularly in poor working class communities where there's a where there's like, it's a fundamental thing that we have to, that when we're talking about reproductive health care, the idea of whether you have children or not, whether you have access to condoms or to, or to pills, etc. All of this is kind of the everyday. That ideology doesn't feature as heavily. So I have not seen something like that in my district. In the next couple of weeks, as I continue to go out and do heavier campaigning than I've done in a while, because I have a competitive primary, particularly in parts of the district that my new district that I have never represented before, I might have something different to tell you. But for the moment, that has not been my experience.
That's great. And I think a lot of it really just has to do, everyone looks at the whole Southern strategy and how there was this flip between the Democrats and the Republicans. The reality is that I think it just has a lot to do with what the culture is in certain parts of the United States. The Northeast has always been, like the West Coast, and obviously parts of the Midwest, the most forward-thinking parts of the country. And when you're in parts of the country that are the most regressive in many ways, like the Deep South, particularly where we are, there is this knee-jerk tendency to not evolve, to have a very almost ancient mindset about the roles of women in society and things like that. I really think it's regional. I really do. A lot of people think this is a GOP, Democrat fight, but I think it just has more to do with the splits that exist within the country. Now, of course, the evangelicals have completely captured the GOP. That is a fact. And I think that is very reflective in the way that this whole issue has been dealt with, because they are powerful. And not only are they powerful, but they give a lot of money. And, obviously, the archdiocese are also very powerful in New York, Baltimore in particular. But in their case, they're much more favorable on the Democratic side because that's where the votes are. And if the voters say, we believe in a woman's right to choose, fighting against that's not going to be beneficial to them in terms of their power structure within the big cities. But in the South, I mean, forget it. What's going on down here. And the only reason why I don't think it's on overkill in Florida compared to states like, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Missouri, which have the trigger laws in place, our governor thinks he's going to be the next president. And while he might be able to get away with it in Florida, he cannot run on that on a national level. And I think that's a huge part of why Florida still has the 15-week ban in place. You can debate whether that should be what stands. But I really do think that this is a regional thing. Do you think it's more that, or do you think it's more a party thing?
I think it's both a regional thing and when you're saying about who has captured the Republican Party, I mean, one of the most frustrating things about being a Democrat these days is that many of my national leaders don't seem to recognize the actual battle that we're engaged in.
Yeah.
The folks that have actually captured the Republican Party are not folks that just have different opinions on taxation and different opinions on school choice. And, no, these are more fundamental conversations. There is a creepy fascism in this country that is flowing directly through the Republican Party. And unfortunately, some of my Democratic colleagues are kind of aiding and abetting by not treating it for what it is. And so on this issue, for example, the idea, abortion was made into a political football. While when we communicate about it as a deeply personal issue that needs to be done, this is not about forcing people to have births, right? We don't talk about it that way enough, right? We say this is about the pro-life people. It's about I'm pro-life. Yeah, but we're forcing people to give birth. That's what we're doing. We're forcing 10-year-olds in Ohio to give birth. And this is what the official position of the Republican Party is. And we're not. So I think it's certainly regional. It's ideological, and unfortunately, many of our colleagues, my colleagues in the Democratic Party, don't seem to recognize that this is what we're actually dealing with. And by the way, you're saying, I would be really interested. You got DeSantis, and you got freaking from Texas. What's his name?
Abbott.
Governor Abbott.
Yeah, that guy. So these two things are competing against each other. So who's going to be worse? Who can be the next generation Trump? Who can be the next? And so it's interesting because Abbott is taking a very different tact. He's actually going all in. He's committing himself to this idea that this is the way of the future. I can see what you're saying about DeSantis, that he might be making a calculation that as a national issue he's not going to be, but Abbott is trying to become the Republican nominee as well, and you see how far right he's going. So it's all of this is just, I mean, it just makes you want to start drinking early in the day. That's all.
Well,
I I've actually picked up my day drinking quite a bit since I've been up here. And because we sit here and talk about this, and I just feel infuriated. I don't even like hearing people talk about whether or not 15 weeks is reasonable. I feel like I'm listening to people discuss my body. Yeah. Like I'm listening to other people, many of whom don't have a uterus, discussing what we should be doing in the body. And quite honestly, at any point, I don't care what week it is. I don't care what day it is. You cannot tell people what they can do with their person. Mm-hmm. It's like, it is so offensive to me. So, I had to vent for a second there about that. I'm sorry.
No, you're just saying facts as far as I'm concerned. And I think that we need to continue to say that over and over again, because we have to recognize the road that we're already been walking down for a while, and it just keeps getting darker and darker in here, folks. It's like the idea that we are. It was George Carlin who said it best. Apparently, these people want just women to be the broodmare of the state. When something like that happens, I mean, we're experiencing right now. We just need to know what it is that we're facing, and we have to think about this as a long-term problem. It's not just about this election. It's about generational change. Weirdly enough, just have to think about what we do in the long term, because if we don't, I mean, these folks have been thinking about this for such a long time, like generations. Again, I'm sorry to use that generational.
No, we love it, please.
But it's like we need to think about this as a long-term thing. We need to think. It's not called a struggle for no reason. Like, struggle doesn't mean one battle. It means many, many, many battles. And we just have to keep thinking about this as a long-term problem.
I was in New Hampshire not too long ago, and the problem in New Hampshire is they've got the free staters. They've got these people who think that they literally take the most extreme elements of libertarianism and believe that taxation is theft, that the government has no place in anything, that we can all live off the reservation and we'll all be fine. I don't really know where that type of disconnect from society really comes into play, but the one thing that libertarians always seem to be very adamant about is control of your person. I am of free will. I can do whatever I want. But when the rubber meets the road, you are going to say that I am pro-birth. I am not for pro-choice. Again, as Jen likes to point out, stop saying, anti-abortion or pro-life, because
we're going to get on that. I'm going to be doing a little public service announcement after this, because I have some words.
I really do think that is something that we have found in politics, is that you're either all in or you're not. I have always lauded in many instances Senator Rand Paul's decisions when it comes to civil liberties, as well as the war budgets and things like that. But you're either a libertarian or you're not. You can't just decide because, well, I'm a libertarian posing as a Republican, or you're a Republican posing as a libertarian, because that's what he's doing. And that's what a lot of others do. You are either a progressive who's posing as a Democrat, or you're a Democrat posing as a progressive. And that is the same problem that we see on both sides. We have to get to a consensus where, like you said, you are either going to fight like a dog who's got a bone, like the GOP did with the Tea Party. Otherwise, they're going to run completely over you. And as we have found through history, and I didn't even think that this was conceivable, but if we stay on this trajectory that we're on right now, Joe Biden, I mean, I thought he was going to fail as a president to begin with. I didn't think he'd be this bad, but he may be entering into like James Buchanan territory, because we've got really dangerous elements of society that are creeping in right now. And when somebody points out the other day, as I'm sure you saw, the white nationalists that were marching in downtown Boston, and everyone is wondering, well, how does something like this happen? When society squeezes you so goddamn tight the fringe elements of society are going to look really attractive to desperate people. This is throughout history. This is not a new thing. And we are at a point right now where these fringe elements of society are taking over, like overturning Roe v. Wade. And I really do think if we don't get our act together, like you said, and treat this as a moment in time where we could slip into fascism, we may already be partially there already. That's why inaction is the worst response to this. We have to get tough. And you're absolutely right about that.
One thing I would suggest that everybody do is I always keep it. I don't have it too far from me at any one time. This is On Tyranny, 20 Lessons from the 20th Century by Timothy Snyder, who's a historian, particularly of the Second World War. But there is much in here that is both scary and revealing. It's like you just have to think about the times that were, it is said often that's like, oh, but when I look back at history and I think about, the Second World War or the civil rights upheavals of the 60s, etc. What would I have done in those times? Well, guess what, folks? We're living in the middle of a historic moment that unfortunately is not going to, it's not a movie, right? It doesn't go from like event to event to event. There's event, and there's all the quotidian stuff that we got to do, because at some point you got to get some lunch, got to go to the bathroom, whatever. And then another event, and that we are living in the middle of that. And it's a responsibility that we have to recognize it for what it is and act accordingly. And we can't again, there's like so much that national leaders just don't seem to get it. The way that they're acting sometimes, like, folks, don't you see what's actually occurring? I don't understand. And this is a book that's actually pretty good on that regard. It just kind of scares you a little bit, but then gives you a little bit to work with, at least. What are some of the things that we could do on a day-to-day basis to try to deal with this stuff?
We had a question that we didn't get to. Peter, you want to put it up?
Our good friend of the show, I'm sure you know Roger Meadows. He's been up in Albany many times. Will you put forth a BI amendment to allow New Yorkers to propose and pass laws and amendments to the New York State Constitution using ballot initiatives and repeal laws via veto referendums? That's a good question.
I can't say I'm supportive of that. At first glance, the first thing I think about is the way that California has become kind of a free-for-all, as far as if you have deep enough pockets, you can put up ballot referendums that just basically can just like upend the entire process. I mean, just like we could potentially be I would love to hear more about why somebody would think that is a good thing. I can understand, at least in principle, the idea of providing kind of a direct way to connect with people with the people who might want a certain law or a certain thing to happen, etc. It just seems to me like it is just opening the door for folks who are already dropping millions of dollars in other places where they can do this, and they can just put up certain proposals that benefit certain sectors, and then be able to plan it out so that they can mobilize just enough people that they need to actually get that done. I would be very weary of that.
That's a very good point, and we have said many a times, there are a lot of issues, particularly with California politics, that I don't think it's talked about enough. Everyone wants to gloss over the fact that they have a Democratic supermajority, but it is not a well-governed state. There is no getting around that, and there's a lot of people who want to try to, be in denial of it, and that's why we've been very adamant that, the New York Health Act is much more likely to pass than CalCare. It is much more likely, based on the current structure that is in place and the way New York politics is done. And we're huge proponents of ballot initiatives, but like you said, when you have the ability to just put anything out there, and as Jen, you like to point out, almost not even universally, but a significant amount of time, ballot initiatives that make it to the general election ballot are going to pass regardless of what's even in them, because people just have a tendency to vote yes without even knowing the details. We've been in situations down here in Florida where I think it might have been like 2014, where we were told to vote yes on one form of environmental benefit, and then in the general vote no, because they were going to add like a little caveat in there to allow like dumping and stuff. It's absolutely crazy. And of course, we also have to remember what a very small political bubble we exist in terms of having the vast knowledge of how all this stuff works. Because we have to remind ourselves that most people really don't understand all of these nuanced details.
Yeah, we're mutants. Just acknowledge the mutant. I'd certainly do that.
Final thing before you go. Obviously, we've got a number of big elections coming up, yours included. We are going to have some state Senate candidates that are going to come on. What is the goal from your perspective? If we're going to get closer to the New York Health Act, and obviously we had a phenomenal congressional candidate who we are really rooting for, Yulee Liu. I think she is fantastic. And of course, if she's able to represent Manhattan, that would be wonderful. But it's really about the New York State Senate. That is the big election that is coming up later this summer. So what are the goals right now in terms of the elections that's going to get New York that much closer to potentially getting over the line regarding the New York Health Act?
Quick parenthesis. Let's not dismiss how important the assembly is and how important it is going to be to take more seats in the assembly. We have two of the two seats that progressive candidates won that were WFP backed, by the way, one in the city and one in the Hudson Valley. And both of them are going to be that we need to have more folks in the assembly that actually can kind of caucus and continue pulling it leftwards. So I'm not going to say no to that. In the case of the Senate, it is obviously going to be messy because this entire process with lines got threw everything into disarray. Among other things, if I want to stay in the building that I've lived in a rent stabilized apartment for 22 years, I would have had to primary Robert Jackson. So I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm going to have to move, and I'm not looking forward to it, but it is what it is to be reelected. So I think I would say that we have to keep a majority. And I believe that we will be, I think that we certainly are going to do that. It is about making sure that my colleagues all hear from their constituents. If the folks are watching are New York State residents, like, you need to actually make sure that my colleagues hear that this is something that you care about, that the New York Health Act is something you care about, and then join the campaign so that we can continue to put pressure. The reality is that as we said earlier, it is an incredibly complicated thing. We're trying to change fundamentally the way that we deliver healthcare in the state of New York, and that is an enormous, enormous thing. So we got to get everybody on board. That means we have to have many of my colleagues who have been sponsors to become champions of it. We have to make that transition, because it's one thing to put your name on a bill. It's another one to mention it at town halls in your district. It's mentioning it to the leadership within the conference, mentioning it to groups that want to endorse you, et cetera, that it's a priority for you. And so I believe that there is a very big part here of keeping a majority, certainly, but reminding my colleagues of how essential and important this is, turning those folks who have been sponsors into champions, and getting folks that are trying to become senators to commit to actually being part of it. And it says right there, join the campaign for New York Health at nyhcampaign.org. And I understand it's a little bit self-serving, but I'm going to put it in at the end. I want to make sure I come back.
Yes.
It's my bill. It's not only my bill. I'm the chair of the health committee. What's
your website?
Oh my God. It's only been 3.5 weeks that I've been, if you follow me on Twitter at nysenatorrivera.com, you will be, I will be putting all that stuff up there. It's 3.5 weeks ago, bro. I didn't think I was going to have a primary. And then the entire thing got thrown into disarray. And now I'm in a competitive primary where the local county organization today announced their endorsement of my opponent, who is a person. I've only met her one time. But she is certainly loyal to the party apparatus. Unfortunately, I'm not a very good knee bender. So I don't bend the knee too well. So I guess that means that I got to go. So,
Jen, whatever we can do to help. I mean, let's lend a hand. I mean, this is
part of it. Certainly, you should get your ass from Florida up here to New York, so we can actually go knock on some doors in the Bronx. That's what I'm going to do this afternoon. Like I'm
When is
doing it
the
every day.
election?
Do it every
When
day.
is the election? When's the election?
The election is August 23rd is the Democratic primary. A lot of stuff, as I said, because this is something that's so new, I didn't think I was going to have a primary just a few weeks ago. So everything is coming into place in the next few weeks. Our website is going to, I haven't had a competitive primary since 2016. So my website is old. I've just been focusing on that whole thing. Governing. I've been focused on the governing piece. So my website is old, but all of that is being updated right now, and I am just getting out there talking to voters, asking for their support, taking nothing for granted, and assuming nothing, asking for their support, and hoping I get it on August 23rd.
I'm going to shoot you a message. I'm going to be up there for a week. I have
Dude,
a wedding to go
seriously.
to. Yeah,
Seriously.
I have a week. I have a wedding to go to in near Boston, and I'm going to be staying in Central Jersey for about 5 days. So I'm going to take at least a day or two to come meet up with you in the Bronx.
Beautiful.
That'll be probably around like August 1st, August 2nd, somewhere around there. So
I'll be knocking on doors.
Yeah,
in wonderful weather.
Jen, can you possibly find your way up to New York? Is that possible?
Because that's when we're doing our family vacay that we're going, and so we're going. But yeah, I will definitely keep that in mind if anything opens up between now and then.
Okay, well, I can go for a day or two, and then you'll come afterwards. We don't have to be there at the same time, but Lean would love to see you, and I'm sure that there are other people in New York who would love to have you there. I mean, got lots of campaigning to do in New York City.
Quick joke on the New York 10th. This whole thing that Mondare is doing, which I'm like, it's like me saying, hey, there's some great Puerto Rican restaurants in Buffalo, so I'm going to run for Congress there. I don't understand it. I don't get it.
And that is where, and leave it to a woman to have to do the freaking job. Alessandra Baeghi, who I do not agree with on everything, but the fact that she is stepping in to run against Maloney, that's all you need to know. Anybody who's willing to challenge corporate power, they have my respect, and I'm sure, Jen, you feel the same way.
Of course.
That's what it's all about. Yeah. Guys, if you are not currently supporting New York State Senator Gustavo Rivera, make sure you get to the NewYorkHealthCampaign.org. Follow Gustavo on his page. And if you are in the New York metropolitan area, New Jersey, Connecticut, even Pennsylvania or Massachusetts, and you have the opportunity to get to the Bronx and get out there, I'll be there wearing my Yankees hat, and I'll be knocking on doors where all the Yankee fans are and getting their asses out there to vote for this guy, because he knows we cannot be taking any of this for granted so often. And it is the biggest problem on the left, as you know. We are like a cat chasing the red dot on the wall. Every time you only go after the top seat, the seats at the lower level, the seats at the local level, this is where the sausage is made. This is where we can get the New York Health Act. So we cannot mess this one up. So let's make sure we get all of our ducks in a row. Get your asses there, or get on the phones, get on the texts. Make sure you help this guy out. He's a friend of the show, which automatically makes him cool. And of course,
you, sir. And one thing that I'll throw to everybody out there: if folks are not familiar with something called Arthur Avenue, Arthur Avenue is the actual Little Italy in the Bronx. It's not that Little Italy in the south of Manhattan is a lie. They've been lying to you. The real one is up in the Bronx. It is the original one. So we can go knock on doors for a couple of hours, and then when you're really tired and thirsty, then we go to Arthur Avenue, get some of the best Italian food in the world. See, it's a win-win, folks. It's a win.
Now he's really trying to threaten me with a good time.
Why do I love you like I do? Because now I got to go see A Bronx Tale, thanks to you. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The doo-wop is back on the street. So that's going to be doing it for you. Gustavo, thank you so much for coming on, as always.
It's a great pleasure to see you, folks. And guess what I'm going to go do this afternoon? Going to go knock on doors. That's what the hell I'm going to do. That's my man. Take care, folks. Thank you for having me on. Be well.
See you later. What can you say? We need more representatives. We do need more representatives. Yeah, and it's not that he's lovely. He is just great. He really is. And that is the type of person that we need representing us. And you even pointed out, weren't you a teacher at one time? Yeah, he's a professor. He is somebody who actually gives a damn about people. You have to be like the two most underappreciated professions we have in society are teachers and nurses. You have to really give a damn to do that work for a living. Like you really do. And having those types of people in positions of power not just hedge funders and lawyers, sorry, Jen, as our representatives. That's a problem. And it's not to say that you can't have wealth management people and lawyers and doctors being representatives, but you need more of the people, social workers. You don't see them running for office, but they should be.
They can't afford to run for office.
Yeah.
So that's why you see so many lawyers and doctors and such, because they're the ones who can afford to run for office.
They'll be here soon.
So, all right, should I do my little public service announcement?
Jen has a public service announcement.
I have a public service announcement. And so we'll make a clip of this so that we can put it out there, because this is actually really, I want to make it addressing people like Kyle Kulinski. And I actually texted this to Mike Figueredo a little while back as well, but any content creators that are pro-choice, they have a tendency to use the words anti-abortion. I loathe the term anti-abortion because you know what? We're all anti-abortion. There's no pro-abortion people. There's not like a contingency of people that are pro-abortion. And I feel like when you look at our news media, it very often uses the phrase anti-abortionists, anti-abortionists. That's rewarding those people with some sort of like, you're saying it like that. I mean, yeah, they're anti-abortion. So am I. I'm not pro-abortion. So please stop falling into that right-wing narrative. You guys are big. If you're a big content creator on the left, please stop using the term anti-abortion. They're not anti-abortion. They're anti-choice. They're not pro-life. They're anti-choice. It's very simple. They're not anti-abortion. They're anti-choice. That's my public service announcement. And then I also wanted to say something about that reel from Anna Kasparian, and I actually pulled it up so that I can share it because, so guys, Anna Kasparian made a clip. This was from a few years ago. I don't remember it from the time, but apparently it went viral again recently. And I just thought she really did a good job of expressing exactly what my sentiment would be on this issue. And I want to, props where props are due. So I'm going to share this.
I don't care that you're a Christian. I don't care what the Bible says. Like, I feel like it's a clown show, like sitting here trying to decipher what your little mythical book has to say about these very real political issues, right? I don't care if you're Christian. In fact, I will fight for you to have your religious liberty and practice your Christianity. I believe in that. I don't believe in Christianity, which means that you do not get to dictate the way I live my life based on your religion. I don't care what the Bible says. You have every right in the world. All those women who identify with your religion have every right in the world to not get an abortion, to not take birth control, but they do not have the right to dictate my life and what I decide to do with my body. I don't care about your goddamn religion. I'm so tired of having nonstop conversations about what the Bible says. You live your life in the way that you interpret the Bible. Again, I don't care, but you don't get to take the Bible and tell me, well, the Bible says this in this chapter and this verse. I don't care. I don't care. I don't believe in it. And I have the right, based on our Constitution, to not believe in it.
I love that. So anyway, props to Anna Kasparian. And I don't know exactly when that's from.
Discover Card here to explain our cash.
Take off your internet, Jen. You are really bad at this.
I did that.
So
anyway, props where props are due.
And this is a perfect opportunity to basically say, look, we had it out with Anna, a number of months ago because she and Cenk were very fascistic in regarding their approach to Aaron Mate's opinions about international war correspondence and whether or not what we're doing in other countries is on the level, or basically disseminating a lot of the things that go on in the Middle East, and them saying that he's an Assad puppet and all of that. But the big problem in left politics is this idea that, okay, so you disagree on that point, so let's just throw the baby out with the bathwater. as we've often pointed out, is the same problem that we deal with Andrew Yang, is that you can agree with him on 20 issues, but if the 21st issue is wrong, he's finished. If Anna Kasparian is correct about a significant issue, then we should be mature enough to say, great job, let's focus on the things that we can agree on. So often on the left, it's this disintegration of any type of common ground because you found something along the way that you said, nope, terrible idea, don't like it. In fact, I don't like it so much that I don't want anything to do with you anymore. Get lost.
Well, this is where I like to think that I have a little bit more maturity regarding context and nuance, which seems to be dead. But no, her little rant there from however long ago that was is exactly how I feel about all of these things. Like when I even hear people talking about, well, 15-week ban sounds reasonable to me. Oh, I think it should be a heartbeat bill. And I hear all these people debating, well, second trimester, no third trimester. And I really I want to be like, get the fuck out of here with that. Seriously, like it's infuriating to me that this is a discussion that we're still having. It's outrageous. And by the way, the majority of these pro-life people, they're not pro-life, they're forced birth. Because once that baby is born, they don't want to give it healthcare and education or housing. So these are not people that are for life. These are people that are forced birth and anti-woman. And I'm just so sick of listening to fucking men sit there and debate which trimester and weeks and heartbeat. Are you kidding me? So there's an appropriate week for you to determine what's okay to do to my person? I can't even. It's infuriating to me.
That was always the biggest takeaway from my perspective regarding this entire thing, was how many men were voicing their opinion about a woman's right to choose. If there was a significant contingent of women that were coming out saying it's really terrible and no one should be able to get an abortion. Okay.
There are.
Yeah, well, yes, but here's the problem. It's not even close. It is so many more men that have been vocal about this, saying that women do not have a right to choose.
Yeah.
Dudes, get fucked. Seriously, get fucked.
Yeah. But it for a long time, I couldn't decide what actually infuriates me more. Men that are opposed to my right to choose and have bodily autonomy, or women that are opposed to my right to choose and have bodily autonomy. And I've come to the conclusion that they're it's equally as infuriating. I can't even.
We are awaiting the Vanguard. Gavin was just in the green room for a second. I'm sure he'll be back. So
what do we have? Do you guys think fascism becomes more attractive when they've experienced decades of failure and inadequacy from institutions? Like at some point, people want absolutely. That's by definition how you get fascism. That's how we got Trump. That's how you get all sorts of like real authoritarian, commanding leaders, is people are sad and desperate and they're looking for a way out, and then that person comes and they other the other people. So it's the Mexicans at the border, or it's the Muslims, or it's whatever it is, and people love that when they're sad and desperate. Absolutely.
1000%. And that's what people still are failing to recognize about what is happening right now. Like we talked about with the white nationalists marching in Boston. It's like, you think that this has anything to do with Trump stoking fires with the stuff he says? It's like the mass shooter in Highland Park the other day. The first thing they want to point out is that this guy went to a Trump rally. How about the fact that if our country was functioning properly in terms of healthcare, living wage, environment, and all of that, people like Trump would never succeed, because things are not bad enough for morons like that to rise up and convince people that they're the answer. A carnival barking game show host is the answer? No, that's only the answer when the society has completely failed. That's what happens. So this will be a fun discussion. We have been on their show. They've been on our show. They are two of the very best non-corporate commentators, podcasters on YouTube today. You know them as the Vanguard. Gavin and Zach, welcome back to Generation.
Hey, what's up, guys? How's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, I hear Zach's driving in his car.
Yeah, I'm going on I-70 through the Rocky Mountains right now. So if the audio is terrible, I'll spend most of my time on mute. But appreciate you guys having us on.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Yeah, great to see you both. Thanks so much for the invite. Excited to chat.
Yeah, at a time like this, you brought up a really good point, with your conversation with Kyle the other day that, we have to be able to have more of these conversations, this cross-networking with a lot of channels because, a lot of times people are just kind of off doing their own thing. But realistically, and especially now with Roe v. Wade and obviously with the inaction of the president, we have to become a much more galvanized, movement as far as I can tell, especially from the non-corporate left side of politics.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that one of the most important things and sometimes underrated things is just what you're saying, talking to people that don't always agree, but have certain key goals in common. And that's something I've always felt like is just an obvious answer to coalition building, which so many people, seem to be unable to wrap their minds around. It's like, yeah, you're going to have to deal with some people that you disagree with on any given issues. We were talking a little bit in that interview with Kyle about how, Zach and I have had some conversations even with like libertarians, stuff like that. And there are serious areas where we can work together on, police brutality, for example, or the war on drugs. There's a lot of issues there.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, Jen.
No, go. I see. If you had a visual, then I forget that you're there. That's the problem. Please go.
Oh, no, I was just going to piggyback on what Gavin was saying and say, this is kind of an extension of the argument that I think Ryan Grimm was making in his piece, or at least describing. The problem with the left is that we need to always be able to actually act, right? We need to have a game plan together for when the rubber hits the road. And of course, the nuances to all of our different disagreements, they're all worthwhile and they're worth hashing out. And Gavin and I spend a lot of time debating the minutia. But when it's time to, do something as serious as re-seize rather, a fundamental human right, such as, a woman's right to, reproductive health care or any number of issues that are now under threat with the fascist fucking Supreme Court that we have. It's time for us to really unify and say, okay, well, you know what, I might not like all of your behavior, or I might disagree with you when it comes to X, Y, or Z, but we all fundamentally believe that this is an attack on human rights and we're going to stand and rally against it. And I don't give a fuck who I'm standing next to at a rally to, restore women's rights. And because in Missouri, we already had our trigger ban, it's completely gone. There are no abortions in Missouri where we live. So the urgency is real now. I mean, that you cannot get a legal abortion in our entire state. So we need to be able to prioritize that major issue and set aside the fact that I'm sorry, you voted for Elizabeth Warren or you wanted to in the primary. That's completely irrelevant right now. We're trying to get some real human rights restored. So we can't be those disagreements are worth having, but we need to be able to set them aside completely when we're doing something serious.
I don't know, man. I think Elizabeth Warren voters still need to answer for their sins.
Yeah, you wouldn't.
I'm just kidding, bro. I'm completely kidding.
I don't completely disagree with that. A simple acknowledgement of falsifying Bernie and holding him out as a sexist would be sufficient, probably. But short of that, I don't know that they can ever come back.
I was completely kidding, but yeah, I see both your points.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that as soon as it came down, as soon as Roe v. Wade got overturned, we're sitting in a situation where the first instinct, kind of like yesterday, the first instinct with the mass shooter in Highland Park is to say, oh, he went to a Trump rally. Oh, well, Roe v. Wade is overturned. How about those damn Bernie bros that voted for Bernie instead of Hillary? It's like you haven't learned anything. You really haven't. Anyone who wants to talk about why Roe v. Wade got overturned doesn't want to talk about the 49 years of codifying opportunity that was there in 3 different Democratic presidential administrations and never got done. Priority when campaigning, not a priority when elected.
Yeah, Obama literally explicitly said in 2009, that's not a top legislative priority at the moment. It's why? That was at least 10% of your campaign.
Yeah. Well, it's not exactly like the first time that somebody campaigned on something and didn't do it. I mean, look at who's sitting there now. He hasn't done anything that he said he was going to do. In fact, he's still building the wall. He's keeping up Trump's deals. I don't think he's gotten rid of that nice tax cut for the wealthy people. So, he hasn't done much either.
I think this is a very important discussion that has to happen right now because, I wasn't thinking about it too much the other day, guys. but it kind of dawned on me last night, for some reason, in light of it being the 4th of July and just everything that's going on right now, I thought Biden was going to be a bad president. I even thought it was possible he would be a failure. He is possibly heading to James Buchanan type territory as a failure of a president. Please share your thoughts on just how bad he has been. And then, of course, the prospect that he really does need to be primaried, regardless of what his plans are in 24.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what you said. He's way worse than even I would have expected. Because even though I didn't vote for Joe Biden, I voted for Howie Hawkins, the Green Party candidate. I'm not going to lie, I was still a little bit relieved when Trump, finally left office. And it was like, okay, well, at least as much as I disagree with Biden, as corrupt and horrible as he is, at least now we have some like adults in the room, right? Apparently not even that, because the country's still in total disarray. It seems like, the government is just as, corrupt as ever. It seems like there's just as much lack of any sort of action. And as a result, it's really empowered the right wing. We have this burgeoning, right wing fascist movement now in this country because of just how ineffectual the Democrats have been. So, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's even worse than expected. And I think whether Biden likes it or not, he's going to have to face some sort of challenge from somebody, whether or not it's a leftist or some guy like Howard Stern, who's just like, it's time for me to jump in this race because I want attention and because Biden's vulnerable.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to unpack when it comes to the Biden presidency, because look, I carry all of the weight and shame of actually having signed off on this. I did vote for Joe Biden. I thought that he was going to at least accomplish a couple of key things that he didn't do. I thought he was going to shore up the Iran deal. I thought he was going to potentially stop supplying weapons to Saudi Arabia, to continue slaughtering and committing basically a genocide in Yemen. These little marginal things. I also am sympathetic to the argument that Trump is a fascist and I wanted him out of office on principle. So all those things. Obviously, Joe Biden is corrupt, and we knew all that going in. He's basically a Republican president, and he's governed as such. So I think as far as, maybe that's a little egg on my face. Maybe I should have anticipated that this guy would be, just a brain dead bag of bones. Gavin and I actually, before the podcast was ever a thing, we ran this blog called the Vanguard blog. And an article we wrote together, actually, we collaborated on. It was called The Weekend at Biden's. And we just photoshopped the like Pete Buttigieg and Barack Obama or whatever, just like carrying Joe Biden's body like across the finish line. And we were like, holy shit, they're actually going to be able to do this. They're actually going to be. And he's just governed that way. Right. In kind of like the same way that the like Republican neocons were able to manipulate how fucking absolutely dumb as rocks George Bush was in the 2000s to do whatever the fuck they wanted. The neo liberal class, the Wall Street class of the Democratic Party, with all of their fecklessness, they're just going to manipulate Joe Biden, who, has no real cognitive ability left. Kamala Harris is a complete disaster as a vice president. She's not able to take any heat off of him. So, yeah, I mean, I think they have to dump him, right? Because the alternative for the Democratic establishment is, as Gavin said, to get a guy like Howard Stern. I think what they'll end up trying to do is rally behind a guy who's younger. I don't think they'll go for Pete Buttigieg because that's tried out. But I think that the Democratic establishment has to realize at this point that Joe Biden is such a feckless, disaster of a president that they have to do something in the primary, which also will open the door. Unfortunately, it's a Pandora's box for them. It will open the opportunity or the door for, somebody else to sneak in and challenge whoever their, predetermined candidate will be. But yeah, that's a long-winded answer. Basically, fuck Joe Biden, and I think that the Democrats are going to, even in all of their, rigid stupidity, going to try and primary him themselves.
Yeah, the thing is, they don't really have anybody. I mean, for me, it almost seems like the only plausible strategy they could come up with would be to replace Kamala and try to run Joe, because she can't do it. And they could maybe bring in somebody as another VP candidate that maybe has more energy, more draw, more something. Mm-hmm. But they don't have anybody that could take a lead role in this. They have nobody.
Yeah, it's really crazy how how much they don't have any rising stars. Like the Democratic Party just has literally no one that's like the obvious next choice. We got Pete Buttigieg and fucking Kamala Harris, Amy Klobuchar. And I will say, Zach and I obviously have spent the entirety of the Biden's presidency just, pointing out all of the failures of his administration, of course. But it actually is nice, I will say, in a kind of sick way, to finally have the rest of like liberal, just mainstream normie Democratic voters kind of catch up to us where we've been the whole time. Because in the wake of the, complete fumbling of the ball and the just total lack of any sort of response to the overturn of Roe v. Wade, I really do see a lot more kind of normie Democrats, people that normally would have no problem voting for Joe Biden. Now they're pissed off too. So instead of the liberals fucking gaslighting us progressives and socialists now, they're with us in feeling this rage and anger towards Joe Biden because now their main issue, which obviously is an incredibly important issue to me too. But when you talk about just most, normie liberal voters, they don't necessarily expect Joe Biden to give them health care or socialism or anything like that. But abortion is the one goddamn hill that the Democrats are supposed to die on. And now that the Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, this administration has proven that they won't die on this hill and they won't even fucking fight for it. We're no longer being gaslit by all these fucking liberals that are telling us that we just need to, vote for Democrats because it's okay. They're better than Republicans. No, now they're on the same page as us, which is this is fucking bullshit. They came into power promising us these things. They're not doing them. We voted for them. We came out in, record numbers, not me, but, the Democratic voters to elect 2 senators in fucking red state of Georgia. All this hard work was put in, all this money was spent, all this time on the ground, all these phone calls made and doors knocked. And what the fuck do we have to show for it? What the fuck do we have to show for it? So again, as fucked up as it is about what's going on as far as reproductive rights in this country, the one nice thing is that now there's some sense of urgency back among the Democratic Party base to actually pressure our goddamn elected officials to do literally anything.
Yet they're fundraising off of it like there's no tomorrow. So I am still getting they're even responding with their general pivot, a la Kamala did it the other day. Oh, but there's an election coming up. All they can do is pivot to voting for someone else in their party, even though we've done that and it's gotten us nowhere. I too regrettably voted for Joe. I will not do it again. I will not. There is no universe that I would do it again. But they're still dangling it. Like, I see what you're saying. Like, people on the street are realizing now how screwed up this is and that they've led us down this road. And yet they're still fundraising off of it.
And it goes without saying that I think a huge part of this, where everybody wants to talk about, well, this is the after effect of, let's say, Hillary, whatever, not winning in 2016, and you've got 3 conservative justices. Lord knows that if Hillary was president, we still would have had conservative justices, maybe not as conservative, but if anyone thinks that we wouldn't have had a Neil Gorsuch replacing an Antonin Scalia if Hillary was president, doesn't know anything about how this works or how it has worked. Maybe you don't get somebody like a Kavanaugh or a Barrett, but you still get somebody really bad. And now what you're also seeing is the after effect of cheating Bernie in 2016 and 2020. So what you now have is remember, Biden had to completely sell out to the corporate establishment in order to stop Bernie. So as a result, you now have Medicare prices going up almost 15%, highest increase in the history of the program. And this is under a Democratic president. So when you take almost $50 million in campaign money from one specific industry running for president, well, that's a lot of political favors that come back. And so the entire corporatization of our political system, which we have always talked about supporting Bernie, is now being shown in the face of these so-called people who think, no, we just need to move to the center, when it's really about corporate versus non-corporate.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
And so going forward, and this is, I think, like a really important thing that I think a lot of people really need to understand, is we know about the author is slipping my name, the one who wrote the book, What's the Matter with Kansas and Listen Liberal, Thomas Frank.
Thomas Frank, yeah.
And he talks about that with Kansas. Well, neighboring state to the east, what has it been like in a state like Missouri? which at one time was always known as a state that was a Democratic stronghold because of the farming community, but that got completely pushed away. And now it's a completely red state. And now, as a result of what has been happening, why is it that Missouri is like this? It has a trigger law that doesn't allow the women's right to choose anymore. But it's so much more than that. What has been your observation being in the heartland as a reason why the Democratic Party has been such an epic failure in your state?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a good answer for that one. And I think this goes for a lot of states, whether it's West Virginia or even a place like Pennsylvania, where the, Democrats are hopefully going to win with the candidate for the Senate, John Fetterman. But I think if the Democrats had their way and had been able to, force Connor Lamb on the voters like they wanted him to be their nominee, I think that Dr. Oz would beat Connor Lamb. And so, John Fetterman was able to get through the nominating process, luckily. But again, if the Dems had their way, Connor Lamb would be the nominee in Pennsylvania. And the reason I bring that up is because that's a microcosm of what's going on in every state across the country, which is that there are good candidates running, whether it's a guy like John Fetterman or here in Missouri, a guy like Lucas Coons, who, I don't agree with him on every single issue, but the guy's pretty in lockstep with the, populist economic left vision for Missouri and for the country that I have. He's the kind of guy that actually has the ability to connect with working class people and is running on a working class kind of platform, super pro union, all the stuff you want to hear, pro $15, anti-outsourcing, a real populist economic kind of Democrat. But even though he's doing well in the polls, the Democrats are, trying to prop up this candidate who's actually the heiress to the Budweiser fortune, who's a total normie Democrat, a total just corporate shill, frankly, and who would get absolutely slaughtered in a general election, which is likely going to be between whoever the Democratic nominee is and Eric Greitens, who's the former governor of Missouri, who's completely disgraced. He had to resign in shame after a huge sex scandal where he had like a mistress tied up in his fucking basement he was blackmailing her. If you're not familiar with that story, it's absolutely insane. But the point is, really look into it. It's fucking crazy. And that guy's probably going to be the next senator from my state alongside Josh Hawley, who's also, one of the absolute worst. So again, the point I'm making is there are good candidates that could speak to Missouri voters, to rural voters, people that aren't necessarily, plugged into the conversation. That these candidates, a guy like Fetterman, a guy like Lucas Coons, really can speak to the kind of bread and butter issues. And again, centering economic populism, they don't get lost in the culture war. Again, this is the kind of Democrat that can actually feasibly win in Missouri. But what does the Democratic Party do with a candidate like that? They try to squish them down and they try to prop up some corporate shill. In this case, the fucking heir to the Budweiser fortune, who has zero chance of beating Eric Greitens in the general election. So, I don't blame the voters of Missouri or West Virginia or Pennsylvania or any of these states which either have completely turned red or are in the process of turning more and more red. I blame the Democratic Party because, again, we do have candidates that are capable of reaching these voters. We do have candidates that are capable of, speaking to the needs of actual Missourians. But time and time again, the Democratic Party wants nothing to do with them and actively works to sabotage their candidacies. And that leaves people with the option of these corporate shills, these rich, centrist Democrats that don't actually stand for anything, that don't actually speak to their needs and clearly don't understand them. If you're a fucking heiress to the Budweiser fortune, you don't know what it's like to be a, average Missourian living in the middle of the goddamn state with living in poverty or something like that. So I truly blame this on the Democratic Party. It's crazy. It almost seems like it's intentional at times, another example is in Kentucky, right? With Charles Booker last time around. Nope. Smush him. And let's prop up Amy McGrath because she's totally going to do well with Kentucky voters. What the fuck is this? So it's 100% the Democratic Party's fault. If they were actually propping up candidates that spoke to working class issues and, actually were able to connect with these voters, I don't necessarily think they would be, losing ground in every goddamn state that's not New York and California.
I do think it's intentional. I think when you're talking about the people at the top of that food chain, and that are really calling shots and making decisions, I do think it's intentional that they're Mick resistance. I think they love to be in that position because they don't have to do anything. And now, even though they finally showed their true colors, they're still fundraising off of the same thing. So I do think it's intentional by the people in the leadership of the party. Certainly it is in our state. Like our state, the way our state party is run, the Democrats, they're purposefully feckless. Like they don't even try. They make no effort. They don't even run for open seats. They don't do anything. And I think that's by design. I do think it's intentional. I think the followers are more just on some sort of color war, tribal type team situation. But I think the people at the top, it's absolutely intentional that they're this feckless.
Would you also be able to speak to one of the big problems that I think exists, especially in places like the Heartland, where people may like, a candidate like a Lucas Kunz, who's also a veteran, which I think goes a very long way in that part of the country, as it will go for somebody like DeSantis if he runs for president. But I really think there is something to be said for how people feel about voting for a Democrat. Like how the feeling that somebody has when they're like, wow, this guy Lucas Kunz, he seems like a really good candidate. I'd really like to vote for him, but my God, do I hate that Democratic Party. I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a real thing, and what's annoying too is that when you are a candidate like a Lucas Kunz, who is more anti-establishment, who's a little bit more populist, it's really unfortunate because on one hand, you want to separate yourself from Joe Biden, who's like historically unpopular. You want to separate yourself from the Democrats and all of their failures and fecklessness and everything that normal working people associate the party with. So on one hand, yeah, you want to distance yourself from that. On the other hand, unfortunately, this is a problem we run into again and again and again, is that to win a Democratic primary, you have to court Democratic Party voters. And most of those people are a lot of times older. They're, wealthier. They're maybe living in the suburbs. They probably watch a shit ton of MSNBC. And unfortunately, they really don't want to hear you, go to war with the Democratic Party as much as just normal independent voters. So in order to win the Democratic primary, you have to walk this very, fine line. And that's really unfortunate. It's a task that I'm not envious of. Obviously, we saw Nina Turner trying to do that. Yes, I disagree with the Biden administration, but no, I'm not going to say anything crazy. Like it's like eating half a bowl of shit again, because we all saw how that was used against her. So I really do, sympathize with this. It's like, how do you walk that line? Because again, unfortunately, unlike a lot of GOP base, the Democratic Party base, they just don't want to hear you attack the president or the party. Bernie also had to walk that line, which is why he refused to criticize Joe Biden, which ultimately, was stupid, but that was his calculus. He's like, a lot of the voters that I actually need to convince, they like Obama and Biden. Obviously the young people like Zach and I and the lefties, socialists, we understand Bernie's message, but a lot of the people that Bernie actually needed to appeal to were kind of the MSNBC listening liberals. And the reason why is because those are the motherfuckers that vote. That's the unfortunate reality of the situation. As enthusiastic and passionate as a lot of young people like Zach and I are, unfortunately, we don't vote in the same kind of numbers that these older MSNBC loving people do. So again, unfortunately, as a candidate, you kind of have to appeal to those people too if you want to win the primary.
Yeah, I think that's basically spot on. And I think that even though it definitely was a hindrance to somebody like Bernie for not clearly, because I think in Bernie's particular instance being in a Democratic primary, him not being willing to distinguish himself from the other candidate enough. We talked yesterday a little bit about this with Kyle, his unwillingness to say no, I don't think that Joe Biden can be Donald Trump. I can be Donald Trump. Every fucking poll indicates that. So yeah, it's definitely a balancing act. And the thing is that the more you lean into not being super explicit with your message and not fucking castigating the Democratic Party, shitheads like me and Gavin are like, this guy's fake. He's not going to fucking represent you. So you definitely have to balance that across the board. And I think that the only other way to really combat that is what Bernie was extremely successful in, and that was bringing in new first-time voters, right? Because I think you kind of have to make a play in either direction. You have to say, okay, I'm either going to take this approach and be much more, down the line. And to be fair, I think that Lucas Kunz and John Fetterman are doing a really good job of doing this. Despite my disagreements with them on the margins, I think that the way they've presented themselves in the post-Bernie primary, especially with, again, how historically unpopular Joe Biden is, they've done a pretty good job of utilizing that roadmap. But I think that the difference between that and is the fact that as Gavin mentioned, most of the people who turn out in a midterm election are going to be even more skewed towards that MSNBC watching demographic, even more so than a general election, which is obviously still, the 55 plus, 65 plus demographic still shatters every other age demographic in turnout by percentages. So, I think in a Democratic primary for like a Senate or a statewide race, that makes a lot more sense. But I think if you're going to win at a national level, you would have to kind of pivot to more of a message of wrangling in all of the disenfranchised voters, all the first-time voters. Bernie was extremely successful in bringing in a lot of Latino voters, a lot of Hispanic voters in places like Texas, Nevada, New Mexico, Arizona. And, I think that if you go back to the more traditional textbook, messaging of the Democratic Party, you'll see those voters drift towards the, faux populism of the Republican Party, which we've seen. But yeah, by and large, I pretty much agree with Gavin's analysis.
I think that a lot of this would be helped if we all had open primaries everywhere, because like just from our experience in South Florida, if we had open primaries, our congressperson would have been gone 10 years ago. It's because they keep it so insulated and you have to be a member of their party to participate in democracy. And they keep it that insulated that allows these people to sit there as long as they do. And I think that if we had open primaries, that would actually help a lot of what you're saying, because I have no problem criticizing people that are worthy of criticism. Their party is secondary to me. Like in that, like, I don't care what party you're in. If you're doing something that's not above board, I'm going to call you out on it. Yeah. The Democrats I tend to go after more because for a few reasons. One, technically that's my party. So I feel like you got to call out your own people first. Like that's the party I'm technically registered as. So, okay. And I also feel like they're just not even trying. So there's just more of that, but I would not give them a pass or Biden a pass just because I'm a member of your party.
Fuck no. Yeah.
And if we had open primaries, we would have a lot more flexibility and you would see a lot more people willing to stand out, I think.
I totally agree. Oh, sorry. Just one thing I'll add real quick is that I know you guys also had Jesse Ventura on your guys' show, which was dope. When he was on our show recently, he said something that I really liked too. And he might have said this too when he was on your guys' show. He's like, why does he even say the party on the ballot? Like when you're voting for people, it should just say like this person, this person, this person. Which one do you want? Because it's all just fucking branding. Like if you actually just look at the issues, obviously a guy like Lucas Coons is so much more serious than a guy like Eric Greitens, or a guy like John Fetterman is so much more serious than a guy like Dr. Oz. And I think most people, if all they had to look at was the actual issues one by one, they would obviously see that. But again, it's all this fucking branding. It's all of this party bullshit and culture war nonsense and personality shit that I think that really gets in the way too.
We're speaking with the Vanguard, Gavin and Zach. Zach will, I'm sure, be back in a moment. This is a very, very important topic. Speaking of open primaries, what is being done in North Carolina right now to Matthew Hoh, who is attempting to run for Congress, to the U.S. Senate? He is attempting to run for the U.S. Senate on the Green Party ticket in North Carolina. He clearly met the requirements to get on the ballot. And Mark Elias, who is one of the dirtiest, slimiest swamp dwellers in Washington, D.C., who everyone thinks is this election integrity guy who protects the Democrats from Republicans. No, he protects the establishment. That's his job. And so he's paid very well to do it. And now it looks like they may have just crossed the line a little too far. There's going to be the Streisand effect of basically turning Matthew Hoh into a much more prominent candidate, which is a great thing because we think the world of him. And in their haste.
By the way, Zach, you should mute yourself.
But in their it's all good. But in their haste, they decided that trying to just get him thrown off the ballot wasn't enough. Let's call people and threaten them and pose as the Green Party, which is fraud, and they should be prosecuted for that. What do you guys think is going to happen in North Carolina as a result of this? And we all know that it was already trending towards I think Mudd will likely win on the GOP side. But we all know for sure that if he does win, and if the GOP wins in that state, they're just going to blame progressives anyway. Like the same thing will continue. But I think right now, this is a very seminal moment that I don't think people are realizing. If you're going to galvanize sort of like a third party movement, this is a pretty big moment that I think people are underestimating. What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, we talked to Matthew on the show a while ago when he was still trying to get ballot access. Really impressed by the guy, super strong candidate. I'm not 100% caught up to date on this story. We need to have him back on the show to, get all the latest deets from him. But catch me up. You said that they I heard that they successfully got him off the ballot, right? And I know that happened.
I'll do a quick rewind because Matthew's actually going to be on the podcast tomorrow night. So essentially, what happened was this. He was getting ballot signatures. They raised some money. They were able to hire, I guess, like an organization that was helping with the ballot signatures as well. The requirement to get on the ballot was about 13,500 some odd signatures that they needed. They ended up getting like 22,000 signatures. And most of them were valid. There were a handful that were not. A couple of thousand, I think, may have been duplicates or weren't registered properly. But the end result was that they had more than enough registered voters who signed the petition to get Matthew on the ballot as a Green Party candidate. And so the argument from the Democratic Party is, well, you have some of these signatures that are not valid, so therefore we can't trust you and we have to throw you off the ballot. And this is a Democratic Party-controlled board of elections in North Carolina, right, even though it's a purple state. And as a result of that you would think that would be bad enough, but this is where it gets really dirty. So as Kyle Kulinski, credit to him on Secular Talk, did a great segment where he was able to capture the audio recording of the people who signed the ballot and were getting phone calls from Democratic Party operatives posing as Green Party members, basically telling them, do you really want to sign that petition? Do you really want to rethink that? The Democratic Party is going to potentially lose to the GOP because you guys are going to be on the ballot. And I'm thinking, my God, this is crazy. But what some of the callers did, which was so smart, they asked them, who are you with? And they asked them, are you with the Green Party? And they said, yes. That's fraud. And that is a federal offense. You can go to prison for that. And will they? Probably not, because the Democrats never get punished for anything. But
that's like some Nixon level shit or something.
Oh, absolutely. And they always say that things like this always become much, much worse. It's not the act, it's the cover-up. And the fact that they have gone to this length to screw him is so like the Streisand effect. You're going to end up turning him into a big, into a powerhouse, which he should be, because he's actually a really good candidate. He's not a fly-by-night guy.
No, I know. We talked to him.
Yeah, he's great. And the Democratic Party is already bloodletting out the yin-yang. Now they're really making themselves look bad, and they cannot afford to look this bad in North Carolina. And if that doesn't top off the cherry on the sundae, this will. The GOP does nothing ever to stop the libertarian candidate from getting on the ballot in any of these states. And in this case, the libertarian candidate is on the ballot in North Carolina, but the Green Party candidate isn't. This is a major scandal that I don't think is getting enough juice yet, but I think if we keep talking about it, it's going to become a much bigger thing.
So just to clarify, he has been officially taken off the ballot, or he will still be on the ballot as a Green?
He is officially off the ballot. They negated his signatures, and now he's suing to his credit. And I think, and he absolutely has a case, 100%.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. So do you think he's going to try to run as an independent now or something like that?
Jen, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, we're going to find out a lot more tomorrow. He's going to come on and talk to us. I am curious about that. I actually appreciate things like this because it really shows these state parties for what they are and how they operate. And whenever the Democrats are always pointing their fingers at the GOP as far as, suppressing elections and gerrymandering and all of these things, but yet there's just as many examples of them doing it as well. So I like, to me, these are things that are just exposing them for what they're worth.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Hopefully he is able to somehow get back on the ballot, because I totally agree. It could have a Streisand effect and lead to him getting more votes than he would otherwise, and really being able to make the case for the platform that he's running on, because he is a super serious, anti-war candidate. really good on pretty much everything that we talked to him about. I just found that he was uniquely serious. Not that, other third party candidates or Green Party candidates are not serious, but a lot of times I feel like when you're trying to convince the general public to actually pull the lever for one of these people, a lot of times in their mind they have certain associations, like, oh, all these kooky, crazy Green Party people, or what, like all these fucking dirty hippies and shit, and then you have a guy like Matthew Ho, who's just a very serious candidate who speaks to the issues, doesn't get lost in the weeds. Perfect, senatorial candidate for North Carolina, in my opinion, as a third party option. So, looking forward to chatting to him too. I'm going to definitely reach out and get him back on the Vanguard so we can talk about all this, because I know it's been going on. I just haven't had the time to do a deep dive yet. So I appreciate you guys filling me in on the deets.
Yeah, no, and it's very frustrating. And, it's just very clear that it's just an across the board establishment corporate thing, way more than it's a partisan thing, in terms of them just keeping their friends in office. And Matthew is a great candidate. I also think that it matters that people have served. And he, of course, is somebody who has served. And I think especially when you're talking to people that are more centrist people or even more conservative people, that's huge. And you're right about what you were saying about the idea of the Green Party and what the perception is. I've been saying it for a very long time. It sounds niche. It just sounds niche. And for a regular person working in the Rust Belt or wherever you are working, you hear Greens, you're thinking tree hugging hippies. And even though they obviously have a much broader platform than that, and I know very many good, serious Green Party people, it's not, I don't think it's broad appealing enough. It doesn't have a broad enough appeal to really be the Labor Party. And really the only party that's going to really be able to do anything in this country is going to have to be a Labor Party. Right now, we don't have one. And until there's that, I just don't think there'll be a big enough coalition.
And I also want to point out, Paul, friend of the show, I don't agree at all with that sentiment. I think that the GOP has one rule and one rule only in their party. In the general election, you vote against the Democrat. That's it. That's their one rule, and they stick to it. If you're going to go based on ballot access, I can tell you this. Joe Jorgensen on the Libertarian ticket cost Donald Trump Wisconsin in 2020. You didn't hear a word from the GOP. Oh, my God, the Libertarian took our votes away. You will never hear that because they don't care. Their attitude is, well, if we lost, we'll just figure out a way to win next time. That's their attitude. The Democratic attitude is, man, we really got to stop those progressives from having an opportunity to vote against us. That's the problem. That's what it is. And this is why the GOP is the varsity and the Democrats are the JV. And as Jen, you always like to point out, it's designed that way.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to that Kyle interview, we were talking about the analogy of the Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington Generals. It's all just a farce. It's all just, controlled opposition.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And going back to the Joe Jorgensen thing, you're totally correct. I remember we did a video about that at the time back in the day when our channel was still really small. But yeah, we were like, looking into the data of the actual vote. And it's like, we always hear about, oh, Jill Stein, split the vote, and Jill Stein was a spoiler candidate. And we were looking at this, we were like, wait, was Joe Jorgen actually a spoiler candidate though? Did she actually cost Trump the election? And it looks like it's possible, right? But you, again, like you said, you never hear the GOP talking about that. You never hear them blaming fucking Joe Jorgensen for losing the election in 2020. You hear them blaming a lot of other things for losing the elections in 2020.
Totally rigged. Gavin,
Yeah.
believe me when I tell you it was totally rigged. I totally won that election. They took it away from me, and we're totally coming back in 24. Why, Jen? Because we're making America great again.
Again.
That's what it's all about.
Do you guys
But
think he's
again-
gearing up to run again, announce his candidacy?
Oh,
That's
Yeah. I think he sees DeSantis as a threat, and I think he's prepared
Yeah.
probably more than ever to really, and especially right now, because I think he fears that there could be some type of a legal issue that could be coming down on him. He doesn't want to take any chances. And if he becomes a candidate, a national figure who's fundraising tens of millions of dollars, it's going to be very hard for the legal side of things to really.
Do you think he's going to get back on Twitter in any way or anything like that? Because that's the only thing that I feel like he's like just so not a part of the conversation right now because of his lack of a presence on social media. That's the only reason why I think like he's going to maybe struggle a little bit more. But at the same time, I don't think DeSantis is as strong as a candidate as people pretend he is. He was strong.
He is.
You think he is?
Yes.
Well,
100%.
here
We're in Florida. We're in Florida.
I know. Well, respond to this thing, because here's what I've kind of been thinking. I felt like DeSantis was a uniquely strong candidate for the coronavirus era, and that he was able to channel all of this kind of populist outrage about lockdowns and all that crap. But now that that's all kind of passed, and that like it seems that society, for better or worse, has moved on from the pandemic, like what's going to be his thing? Is it just don't say gay and all this culture war nonsense? Is that really his whole thing?
He's just really, you know what? His whole thing is really kind of looking like populist. I mean, his whole thing is really looking like someone who's going to stick it to the insiders, and he's not going to do what they say he's going to do. And Florida is a very county strong state. And I think that he's definitely appealing to the very libertarian red aspect of not just here, but everywhere. And yet doing so while still separating himself enough from Trump, which is really difficult to do considering he's Trump's Frankensteinian monster. And so for him to have been able to sort of pull away from that enough that now they're kind of rivals is pretty impressive, actually, to me. I find him to be very threatening politically.
Yeah. And I also think that the other issue with DeSantis that doesn't really get talked about enough is that he has the Republican base on both sides really finding him appealing. You've got the MAGA base, which is right-wing populism and obviously the extremism that is associated with that, who find him to be an acceptable solution to Trump. We all know that the real solution is a left-wing populist president. It is long overdue, and we know that that's what the end game is going to be. Now, whether that comes in 24 or 28 will be determined soon enough. But in the interim right now, DeSantis is most likely tracking to the White House because he has an exceptionally high approval rating amongst independents and GOPers, which is all that matters. It doesn't matter if the Democrats think he's the devil because they can't win a lion's share anyway. His appeal as a governor whose economy is strong. We have a housing crisis here in the state that isn't fought on the lines that need to be fought on. We have a good group in Orlando that we connect with that is really fighting on that front. But that needs to be a statewide fight, and it isn't happening yet. DeSantis always goes where sort of like the political winds are moving. So, for example, recently, no one talks about this, but we talk about it a lot. DeSantis got a major political win in the environmental movement when there was a net metering bill, which is basically anti-solar throughout the state of Florida because there is a energy monopoly. NextEra Energy, I'm sure you're familiar with them. They own FPL, Florida Power and Light. They had a net metering bill of anti-solar that made it to the governor's desk. Why? There were 3 GOP state senators who voted against it, but 3 Democratic senators stepped in and made sure that it got to DeSantis's desk, and then he vetoed the bill. So thanks a lot for making his life that much easier. He didn't need it to be easier to begin with, but now you just gave him a political win that he didn't need. And so while everyone is out there, and they are absolutely right about the Don't Say Gay bill, this is a bill that is tailor-made for the religious crazies who do not want any thought outside of the Bible to exist in these classrooms. Believe me, you think you've got the Bible Belt across I-70 between St. Louis and Kansas City? We got the same damn problem down here. If you get outside of the metro areas, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville's pretty conservative, but between Orlando and Tampa and Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and West Palm Beach, you've got it all throughout Florida. You go to Vero Beach, you've got a church on every street corner. This is a huge part of the culture that people in blue areas really do not understand, that they have engulfed our electoral process, that people who believe in, sky angels think that it's their job to tell people how to live. Right. And so DeSantis is simply placating into that. But what's really interesting about what he's doing is that while you've got all these other governors, including Governor Abbott, saying, let's just ban abortion across the board, he's being smart about it and saying, we need a 15-week abortion ban. That is placating to both sides. That's basically saying, I'm not going to ban it completely, but I'm going to put it in a position where it looks like I'm really catering to the Christian right. But at the same time, not banning abortion in a state where, when I run for president, and he will run, that is going to make him look like a compromised candidate. He is one of the shrewdest political operatives I have ever seen. Like, he is that good.
You think he's going to beat Trump?
I think he would, yeah. Right now, yes, I do. I think Trump is carrying way too much baggage. I think there's a lot of people who think that there is this element of society completely crumbling right now, which it is. And I think Trump would just toss gasoline on top of it all over again. And Trump has a lot of axes to grind. So if he was out there, I think he would look at it as, I'm totally going to take care of these people that screwed me over. He would totally do that. Whereas DeSantis has that same element, but this guy was JAG. He served in combat. He is.
There's that. That's
he
another
is,
thing. He has served.
Yeah, he is Ivy educated. He appeals to those voters in Arizona, those voters in Georgia.
But I mean, the GOP base didn't even care when Trump said, "Oh, I prefer people that didn't get caught." Talking about John McCain, do you really think they cared that much about service? And
no, not the base. The base couldn't care less. They're going to vote wherever the wind blows. But independent-minded people, such as me, like I think for myself, and I'm not necessarily going to follow a line. I prefer a commander-in-chief that has served in the military. I prefer that. To me, that makes sense. I find that reasonable. I think that there's something honorable about it, even if I don't agree with the mission. And I don't think it speaks to somebody's experience, character, and how they go about working as a team, I think it matters. And I think it matters to moderates and independents, especially that are anti-war.
Honestly, I didn't even know that Ron DeSantis served in the military.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he
And
sure did.
that.
Yeah. So the other element here, which I still think is the biggest one of all, and the reason why he's tracking towards the White House, it would be one thing if we had universal health care, a living wage, an actual environmental plan, like a clean energy grid, which the president has the authority to implement right now. If we had things like that, end of the wars, if we were actually dealing with the crises of our time that affect everybody, then you can lean into the culture war. If you're leaning into the culture war before the economic war, you've already lost. And because DeSantis has made the state economy overall strong in Florida for more people than not, there's still effed up problems everywhere. The environment's not as strong as it should be. The housing crisis is absolutely insane. The renting crisis is even worse. And on top of that, yes, you can focus on the fact that they are placating towards the fringes of society when it comes to the culture war, always picking on the most vulnerable of our people. But DeSantis wins that fight because economically, people are tired of this shit. If we were in a situation where we actually had an economy that was working for us, people like Trump and DeSantis could never succeed.
How did DeSantis make the economy good in Florida? What did he do to make it good?
As simple as not shutting down the state. I hate to say it, but that was a huge part of it. And what he ended up doing because of that, people forget that it really has been about 3 years now that we're dealing with all of the, 2.5 years. There is a long window of time that has come about since the pandemic started. What a lot of people don't know is that I know a lot of people think Silicon Valley has relocated to Denver and to Austin and places like that. They have been relocating to South Florida for like a year now. You have this whole new tech industry of people that have been coming to Florida. That is a big part of the reason why the housing crisis is getting even worse, just like it is in California. Wherever tech goes, that's where the problem comes, but they bring the jobs with them. And not only that, but there were at least a couple of million people who moved to the state over the course of the pandemic because they thought, well, you know what? My state's shut down. I can't make money. I have no stimulus checks. I have no universal health care. I need something. If I go to Florida, I'm going to have this opportunity. That is exactly why DeSantis is flying under the radar right now. See, people who are in Florida know these things. You wait till he gets to the national stage, and that's coming. So that's where he becomes this very dangerous animal. And listen, we love Tom Hartman. And the post that he put out the other day regarding how the GOP infrastructure is changing at the state level, especially with the Attorney General and the Secretary of State, yeah, that is a valid point. But if you think that Joe Biden is capable of beating Ron DeSantis in an election where there's no pandemic, I don't know what you're thinking. And I love you, Tom, but you're living in another universe.
Yeah, no, that's
Ron DeSantis against Joe Biden. Put it down right now. I would bet money on it. He not only would win the presidency, he'd win the popular vote too.
Yeah, I think Trump would beat Biden too if it came to that. My only other question though about DeSantis is that I mean, I agree that if the election was held today, he would win. But what do you think? How do you think he will fare after the bruising primary process, where he's going to be getting attacked constantly by Donald Trump? And one thing that Trump is pretty good at is humiliating his political opponents. We all remember what he did to Marco Rubio and Chris Christie, who was also at one point the big Republican governor that everyone was saying, oh, this guy's definitely going to become president. He's so good. He's so great. Trump, fucking easily did away with him.
Well, if I'm DeSantis and I'm on that stage, it's very simple. I would point out the fact that, number one, well, look, with all due respect, Mr. President or Mr. Trump, and I appreciated the support that you provided me with here in Florida. But I got to tell you, when it comes to things like serving your country, I served my country. I was in JAG. You avoided the Vietnam War multiple times, claiming you had bone spurs. I mean, I don't know about you, but, we need a commander-in-chief who actually cares about the troops, who's actually served with them.
Peter, they're going to think that you're trying to campaign for DeSantis. Somebody's going to pull this clip and say that we're working as like,
Hey, listen, I said make America
DeSantis.
I said make America great again. And then the Trump campaign put it in like a press release. And we're like, you got to be kidding me. He really took what I said. And yeah. Well, they're not too far. I mean, we're in Broward County. We're right next to Palm Beach County, where Mar-a-Lago is. And I have no doubt there are people who see the show, but we were saying it over and over again. And the next, we looked at this, and I'm telling you, Jen and I looked at this and thinking, holy shit, somebody on the show really heard this and thought, that's a totally great idea. I'm totally going to use it for myself.
Again, the only thing I worry about is that, like, I mean, I agree to independent voters. Perhaps that would be a convincing line of argument against Trump. But we have to remember it's the GOP base which is actually voting in the nominating process for the primary. True. And those same kind of arguments were used ad nauseum against Trump. Like, oh, you don't respect the troops and like you don't care about decorum and civility. You're not a serious person. The voters didn't give a fuck. They wanted someone that was irreverent and that was out of the regular parameters of what a candidate could say. They don't like they like the fact that Trump is a little bit crazy, and if anything, I feel like Ron DeSantis is just, I don't know. I just feel like he doesn't quite have that same performative ability and charisma. Again, not to give credit to Donald Trump, but when I see Ron DeSantis speak, I don't know. It doesn't have the same quality to it.
No, I totally agree with you that there is this element of showmanship that Trump brings to the table that is absolutely underestimated by a lot of people. I think the other reason that I could still say that Trump could do it again is because the corporate establishment, and Trump is part of it, but there's a whole different element of society that really thinks he's this Molotov cocktail that's just going to shatter it and finally break it as it needs to be broken. We are at this point now where, we talk about the fringe elements of society that are so desperate that don't have anything. And when people start saying, oh, if we just took the guns away, that's going to solve the crisis. That is not going to solve the crisis of desperate people in society who want it all to burn to the ground. You're lucky there isn't a mass shooting every single day in multiple places all over the country. Like you go berserk because there was a mass shooting in Highland Park yesterday. There could be a dozen of them in a month. And telling people we're just going to take your guns, like that's going to suck. No, when people are desperate, they'll find anything. What if they start strapping bombs to their chests and showing up in places like they would do in the UK, like they would do in other parts of Europe? Because they would do that. And they would take 25 people with them when they would do it. Could you imagine if a human bomb went off in one of these places? I mean, it's like...
Or driving a big car through a crowd. Yeah, totally.
They tried to do that in Times Square.
Right.
If you squeeze people tight enough, they will turn to fascism.
Agreed.
Like at some point, you have to recognize.
Here's my other question about DeSantis. Do you think if he lost an election, if he did become president, do you think he would try to hold on to power? Do you think he would respect the Democratic result and concede?
I think he would.
Yeah.
I just think that he's, look, he really leans into the whole men of honor thing. Like the military is very important to him. Like he really, he's also not a warmonger, which is a big deal. Like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, goes without saying, she is 10 times the warmonger than he is. I mean, he talks all the time about how Venezuela's this and Cuba's this, but you never hear DeSantis saying we have to have regime change in Venezuela, we have to have regime change in Cuba. You hear that from Debbie. You'll get that from her. And that's the Democrat. So there really is something to be said for him walking this fine line. Like I said, he is an amazing politician. Not that I support him, but watching his political jujitsu, if you will, is really, really interesting. And people who continue to underestimate him, underestimate him at your own peril. That's what I would say.
I just keep going back to that 2016 stage, and there's all these like stodgy fucking Republicans up there, and then Trump just easily doing away with all of them. And I just can't help but see DeSantis is another one of the, a Ted Cruz, for example. I just can't see, like, you think he's that much better?
I think DeSantis is that much better.
And Ted Cruz? Oh, yeah.
Ted Cruz is, from what we've been told, the most disliked politician on Capitol Hill.
He's the most disliked senator amongst the Senate.
And that's really saying something.
That's saying something.
Not that, and listen, I don't even think Ted Cruz is that evil.
I don't think Ted Cruz likes Ted Cruz.
He's that big of a slime ball. He has no integrity. He doesn't stand for anything. And the second a crisis hits, like what happened a couple of years ago, he gets on a jet and gets out of town because he's a coward. Yeah, he's
pussy.
And let's be honest, his wife might be more powerful than him because of her proximity to.
I'll tell you what. I think if Trump badmouthed Casey DeSantis, that Ron wouldn't have just been licking his boots the next day. I'll tell you that.
No way.
Well, doesn't she have like cancer or something? That would be pretty fucked up.
Yeah.
But even if she didn't, if he made fun of if he called, well, first of all, she's beautiful, but like if he called his wife a dog, he wouldn't stand for that and then bow down like Ted Cruz did and kiss the boot. I don't
know, man. I feel like there's no bottom to the barrel of fucking Republicans just doing whatever they have to do to kiss the ring in order to, become more powerful. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you guys definitely know better than me coming from Florida. So I trust you guys, and I'll stop underestimating him, because up to this point, I've been saying like, we're beyond the coronavirus lockdown, all that shit that he was so popular for. No one's going to care as much anymore. But I guess you guys have made a pretty good case for the fact that it has, helped the economy in Florida to the extent that he can really, run on that issue.
Also, he's been fundraising left and right.
Oh, yeah.
He's been fundraising all around the country. He's been having fundraisers everywhere from New York to California. And he's not he's not running for governor this year. That the Democrats seem to think that there's some sort of gubernatorial race that they're running a candidate in, but he's not running for governor this year.
He's not?
No. He's already won.
But he's running for president already.
He's running for president. He's already won governor. The only people that don't know that are our state Democrats that think they're actually mounting a viable race.
When
you should run, Jen.
I won't ever run a statewide race.
Let's just make sure we get Jen to Congress in 24.
I won't run a statewide race. It's too much here.
I assume, Gavin, you guys will definitely lend a hand making sure that Jen gets a nice boost. We all have a role to play if that comes to pass. But in the interim, I think this is a great place to end the conversation, because obviously I think we all agree, and it's looking more and more likely by the day, that Biden is going to face a primary challenge in 24. It's really a question of how that's going to unfold, and if ultimately, post midterm disaster, whatever it's going to be, he may ultimately decide to step aside. Where do you see it going? Because obviously you guys had the conversation yesterday about Marianne Williamson. I have also been vocal that I think Governor Pritzker in Illinois, he's got a little bit of an it factor to him, and he's got a number of things working in his favor too. There's a lot of people who want to see Bernie go a third round. I don't think that's going to happen. How do you see it unfolding, and what would you like to see happen?
I'm just praying for a primary at all. That's honestly all I want. For one, just to be honest, I really love primary season. I love elections in general. It's, one of the big reasons why I became a political junkie in the first place, is just because I've always, loved following them, loved keeping up with them. And, the horse race shit, I'm an unabashed lover of the horse race. I will not apologize for that. So, I hope there's a primary, just so we don't have to sit here and watch the Republicans have all the fun while our fucking corpse of a leader of the party, is tries to. It's just going to be so depressing, right? So I hope there's a primary at all. I think there will be a primary. I think that Joe Biden is pretending that he's going to run again because he thinks it's going to, if he admits that he won't, it's going to, reveal how weak he is. And that's going to make the Democrats more vulnerable in the midterms. But I imagine after the midterms, I have to imagine that after the midterms, they're going to be like, okay, not running again. They might try to force Kamala, but I still think it's going to trigger a primary. And then again, regardless of the left, I hope there's a strong left candidate. But regardless of that, I think that there's even just normie, centrist, regular Democrats that want Joe Biden out of there. Again, we have guys like Howard Stern. We got guys like J.B. Pritzker, as you mentioned, who's, even though he's a billionaire, at least he has accomplished some of the stuff that he ran on when he ran for governor of Illinois. So at least he has actual accomplishments he can point to, unlike Joe Biden, who hasn't fulfilled any of the promises he made on his platform. So you have that. You have a lot of other people. I like Marianne Williamson. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily think she's the right person to kind of be the heir to Bernie Sanders. And the reason I say that is because I just don't think the thing that Bernie really lacked was kind of his killer instinct. We saw that with Joe Biden. He refused to, to really distinguish himself, as Zach said, from Joe Biden. And while Marianne Williamson certainly would distinguish herself, she's also just a little bit too goddamn nice, in my opinion. Like, she really is I don't know the word. She just almost gives him too much credit sometimes. When I hear her talk about Joe Biden and his presidency, I'm like, we need someone to be even stronger in that regard. So I worry that she would fall into some of the same traps that Bernie did. Plus, she doesn't have the name recognition or any political experience. So, I'm not anti Marianne Williamson. I'm just not necessarily convinced that she would do the job or be able to get it done. But yeah, ultimately, I just hope for a primary. I really just hope there's a primary, because in that event, I do think it's possible that, even a guy like John Fetterman, if he wins the Senate race, sure, he will only have had like a year or two in the Senate, but who gives a fuck? He'll still be a United States senator. I think that he could jump in the race, and I think that
Obama did that.
Obama exactly did that. People don't care how long you've been in the Senate. As long as you have that title, Senator Fetterman, people are going to respect you a hell of a lot more. So he's, if I had my pick of everyone, besides Bernie, who I agree probably isn't going to actually run again, it would probably be Fetterman. I really do think he would make a strong candidate. Have some serious disagreements with him. Obviously, Israel being the number one, kind of like an Andrew Yang thing going on there, where it's like, God, that's just, even Nina Turner kind of went to the dark side on that issue, in my opinion. But again, besides that, I think Fetterman's probably the best the Democrats have right now. And I like some of J.B. Pritzker, but still, just him being a billionaire is a little bit too much for me to outwardly endorse him. But again, I think Fetterman's the best shot they have right now. I think that's been proven in a state like Pennsylvania, which is the kind of state the Democrats need to be able to win if they're going to be at all serious in 2024. And the fact that he's actually, one of their only candidates that's winning nationwide right now, I think, tells you what you need to know about his appeal.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah, and I definitely think that Fetterman, there is something to him, and especially a guy like that campaigning around the country in a hoodie and shorts is very appealing, considering that the Democratic Party, as Jen likes to say, either is going to become the party of labor again, or it is going to go into the dustbin of history. Yep. They are much closer to a complete disintegration as an infrastructural party than they think. There are people who are desperate for something else, and the more the tactics we saw that's happening now in North Carolina come to the surface will be very interesting to see how it unfolds. I think Marianne Williamson has a lot of potential. I think a lot of people base that off of her first run. But again, it really comes down to whether or not she or somebody else is able to galvanize that Bernie movement. Jen and I have always maintained that the person who was most ready to do that was Nina Turner. Unfortunately, because of her 2 congressional losses and the fact that she has basically become a martyr for the Democratic establishment, makes her that much more difficult. And if she were to be the one to primary Joe, oh Lord, the hell that would break loose as a result of that. But maybe that's what we need. I mean, I certainly would not object to it. But I can also see where, she taking the time off. And there's also a lot of people who feel that the GOP is simply unstoppable in 24. And so rather than take their shot then, they're going to wait till 28. So it'll be interesting to see who ultimately comes out of this. But we are definitely 1,000% in agreement Joe needs to be primaried in 24. And
Do you agree that Fetterman's potentially the best shot the left has?
I'm not sure yet. I think that he's very solid. I think it's going to be a combination. I mean, again, it's way too early to tell because, like I said, I think there are a handful of people who are considering the prospect of even potentially primarying Joe. I know there's a lot of people who are just kind of waiting around and seeing what's going to happen. But I think because more than anything else, not just that Joe is such a colossal failure, but the fact that Kamala is so in over her head, and the fact that Buttigieg is so far in over his head. He's even worse than Kamala from this perspective. Kamala has no responsibilities. Buttigieg is in charge of the Department of Transportation, and you've got Bernie Sanders out there literally telling this guy how to do his damn job. That is bad. And of course, it's not.
And Fetterman's one of those people, by the way. Fetterman is one of those people that's out here scolding him and being like, "Do your fucking job, bro."
Yeah.
Well, look, I told Mr. Buttigieg that he has to go out there and do his job. He's not doing a good job. Unfortunately, if I was president, I would have appointed a much better person to the Department of Secretary. But
I was going to say, who thought that Pete Buttigieg was actually qualified and would do a good job in that role? Like, what were his qualifications for that? Being a crappy mayor?
Zero.
I mean, like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
This is really no different. This is the reverse of Trump. Everything's okay when things going okay. But the second a crisis hits, like it did in Trump's latter half of his first term as president, he was an abject failure at COVID. And as a result, he got kicked out. And Buttigieg, who was cruising along thinking, oh, I'm totally going to be just fine running for president. Well, guess what, pal? Now you have a crisis in your line of work, and you are an abject failure at it.
Yep.
And it's going to be hung around your neck like a noose as long as you're in politics, as it should be. And maybe you can move back to the best thing he could do, Gavin. The best thing he could do is move to Indianapolis and run for Congress. That is the best chance he's got at having any future in elected politics.
I disagree. I think the best thing he could do is actually project a goddamn ounce of strength and actually do his job, punish the airline industries. And that would actually make him popular, because what Americans fucking hate more than anything is these goddamn airline companies. Everyone hates the airlines. That's one thing that unites every goddamn American in this country. And it just blows my mind that Pete Buttigieg won't even do what would clearly be politically popular for him to do, which actually would be to do his job. And then he could run on that and say, when you guys were getting fucked by these corporations, I stood up to them. But he won't even pretend to do that because he's actually such a bitch to, corporate America, etc. But one more thing about Fetterman that I just wanted to say is the only other reason why I'm so high on Fetterman is that, the Republicans are either going to nominate Trump or DeSantis in 2024. And obviously the Republicans love to be alpha male chess beaters. They love to pretend to project this strength and masculinity and all this stuff. Picture a debate stage where Trump is standing next to fucking John Fetterman. Who's going to look like the alpha male in that situation? Who's going to look like the bigger, more serious force? It's going to be Fetterman. He would make DeSantis or Trump look like a little bitch. So I just want to see that. I think that the left needs more like tough guy energy. So many people associate the left with these like feckless, elite coastal liberals, losers. We need more like working class, just like a big like guy that looks like he could be a fucking janitor at a high school or a fucking garbage truck man or something like that, just to bring that force into politics that so often is lacking on the left side of things. So that would be obviously that's kind of just like an optics, that's not very substantive, but I still think it matters.
I think it matters. I think it matters a lot. We did an interview on this show a while ago with Brian Kloss, who wrote this book Corruptible, and it talks about how our primate brains are what cause us to elect certain types of characters to leadership positions, even though those characteristics don't serve us in modern times like they did when we were throwing our feces at each other.
Right.
And yet our primate brains still do pick the alpha male. And that it's unfortunate that we think that way, but it is a valid point.
It is a valid point. And not just the alpha male, but who's the more likable guy that you want to have a beer with? The whole George Bush over Al Gore thing. It was like literally he basically won that election because people would rather have had a beer with him than the Democrat.
We would argue he didn't win that election.
Well, that's fair.
He was never legitimate president.
I agree with that. But the only reason he did as well as he did was quite literally, it really did literally boil down to that. People were like, well, this guy seems nice and I would rather drink a beer with him.
And times have definitely changed since then. That is for sure.
Yeah.
And as we stand right now, I think there are some options that are out there. But from an electoral standpoint, yes, I do agree that Fetterman presents a very unique future for the Democratic Party. The only issue is that are they really going to embrace it? I think right now they're embracing him because they know they need to keep the majority in the Senate.
Right.
But once that happens, they're going to try to silence him.
Yeah, I mean, they did try to screw him again by propping up Conor Lamb. Conor Lamb had if you looked at how many people in the Democratic establishment endorsed Conor Lamb, it's like a whole page of names. And then you look at how many people endorsed Fetterman, it's like five names. So the Democratic Party, if they had had their way, Conor Lamb would have been the nominee, which just shows you how fucking out of touch they are. But again, it's not like they have been propping up Fetterman this whole time or anything like that. They only reluctantly accepted him after it became, beyond clear that he was going to win. But he's still a challenge to the establishment as far as I see. Of course, we'll have to see how he conducts himself if he becomes senator. But at least that's the way at least that's how I hope it shapes out.
And we can leave on this note. The reason Buttigieg is not doing anything is because he still thinks he's going to run for president, and he needs that sweet airline executive money. And if he were to do anything to them right now, in lieu of all of their wonderful profits they've made at the hands of Trump and Biden over the last few years, that money go bye-bye, baby. That is why we have to break this corrupt corporate special interest system. And so with that said, my friend, please plug anything you want to plug before you go. The Vanguard is quite the podcast. You guys have some great guests like we do, and you certainly provide some really entertaining content. So the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, just follow us on the Vanguard. Just type that into YouTube and our stuff will come up as the first result. You can follow me at Gavin CMB on Twitter. That's what it says, the little bottom left of my, rectangle. So, hit that up if you want to follow me. But yeah, that's pretty much it as far as promotional stuff goes. I think we do a pretty good job over at the Vanguard. We did have a really cool interview with Kyle Kalinske yesterday, someone who we've been wanting to talk to for so long, finally made that happen. So go check that out. If you're a, longtime fan of secular talk, I think you'll probably enjoy a lot of the questions we asked him and conversation we kind of had with the dude. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, thanks so much for having us on, guys. It was a really good chat. Really appreciate hearing your insights coming from Florida too, specifically about DeSantis. You gave me a lot to think about there. So yeah, really appreciate it. We'll have to talk again sometime soon. And it does look like Zach just showed up again.
Zach's back.
He came just in time to say goodbye.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I went through a wild tunnel and then it started raining and there was no cell phone service. But I was listening along in the car. It was a great chat, and we'll definitely have to do it again.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Be happy to come on. Thanks so much, Gavin and Zach. Have a great day. We'll be in touch.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jen. And by the way, what's your name? Is it Tom?
Peter.
I'm so sorry, Peter. It's just because it's never at the bottom of your screen, so I fucking forget. But I apologize.
I'm kind of a mystery. What can I say?
Mystery.
Great to see you, man.
Well, yeah, it's always good to talk with you guys. And yeah, let's do it again sometime soon.
Bye,
Sounds
Gavin.
Peace.
Take care. So
Always fun.
I think that there are a lot of people that really a couple of things. I think he made some really good points about Fetterman. I definitely agree with that. I think that is the difference between somebody like him and somebody like a Williamson. And, there is sort of like that fighting spirit that is needed, especially from a Pennsylvania standpoint, that I think is very appealing. But, I think a lot of people have a role to play, in this whole thing. And that's really the whole galvanizing of it. Well, let's just say Fetterman is the one, but that doesn't mean that other people shouldn't be running and that we shouldn't be building up stronger coalitions. Ultimately, at the end, it becomes whoever that person is going to be. But if there ever is a time to really sort of change the way things are going, and especially in lieu of what just happened in North Carolina, yeah, I really do think that we could be onto something. But I also think it is our job doing this show to really inform people as to, they talk about the Trump train. Well, the DeSantis train is very, very strong. And I think there are way too many people who are underestimating it. Even these two guys who are politicos all day, every day, thinking, DeSantis isn't that big a deal. Oh, yes, he is.
The Republicans don't really have anybody else. So the Republicans that are wanting to get away from Trump, the Republicans that see him as sort of like a blight on, conservative decorum, those are the people that would love DeSantis because he is basically Trump. He's Trump light without offensive tweets. So
I also love the fact that Rick Scott is going to be put into a very difficult position.
Well, he's the worst. Like
he
he's
is the worst.
absolutely
And
worst.
ironically enough, ladies and gentlemen, Rick Scott is very close to Trump, and Scott and DeSantis do not get along. So that's also a major point of contention because Rick Scott actually thought he was going to be president. Yeah. Well,
hilarious. All right, what do we have coming up?
Tomorrow night, we are going to be speaking with Nomiki Konst. Behave yourselves, but ask questions. Please do.
She is running for it's a new state.
District 59.
State Senate.
State Senate District 59. And we have invited Kristen Gonzalez, the DSA and AOC endorsed candidate. They have not gotten back to us about potentially coming on, although I would imagine after this interview tomorrow they might be. And then we are going to be speaking with none other than a central talking point of today's podcast, Matthew Ho, running for U.S. Senate on the Green Party ticket in North Carolina.
Or not.
Or not. We'll see if we can get him on anyway. We'll see what happens. As far as I'm concerned,
it's really absurd.
It is. It is absurd.
It's unfortunate because the one thing that the Republicans have done really well and very methodical is stack all the lower courts.
Yeah, they have.
And stack all the local nonpartisan positions so that these types of matters. So now he's going to file suit against them, but these kinds of matters are being decided and handled by right-wing jurists.
Correct. But, if there ever was an opportunity, you see, this is what will happen. And then the right-wing jurists will side with the Green Party candidate and the Democrats will cry foul, say, oh my God, they're just trying to stop. They're like, no, you guys just don't have anything. This has been a long time coming. It's a very unique time in history. It really.
Do you have anything else set up? Do we have anything else coming like next week?
Robert Asensio is going to be coming on. He's running for Congress in Florida's 27th or 26th congressional district. So that will be a good conversation. We've got some other irons in the fire, some book guests that'll be coming on. It's the summer, guys. It's the quiet time. We're not in real campaign mode yet. But if there is an opportunity, Jen, if there is an opportunity potentially in your schedule to get up to New York to help Yulene and Gustavo with their races, I'm definitely going to.
Honestly, I just don't know how I do that. I mean, I'm here until there's 4 days in the beginning of August between when I get home from here and when we go on our trip to Boston, and then I'm not back from there until the 14th of August, and then Graham starts school.
All right, so I think that the only possibility would be to potentially come up, to make sort of like a stopover, if you will, in New York for a day or two on your way to Boston. That's probably.
I don't travel like you do, where I just sort of pile as much stuff in.
But this is different because you have a month advance notice. This isn't something that's happening tomorrow.
No, I have a month advance notice, but I have plans that are already made and airline tickets and stuff.
Well, either way, I'll be there. So if you can join, wonderful. If not, no big deal. So we hope you guys enjoyed it this afternoon, Fiesta edition of Generational Change. But remember, we don't do this for our health. We're actually doing it to try to help. And if you guys feel so inclined, you know what's coming. Patreon.com/generational change. You like that cute Lulu sticker that Jen has, made? I think it's really awesome. And
now you're giving false advertising because the actual Lulu sticker doesn't look like that.
But it looks pretty damn cool.
The actual Lulu sticker is that, but without a hat and sunglasses.
Fair enough. It still looks pretty cool.
It is very cute. It really does look. It's very, very, resembling of her.
It is. Well, now you got to really make it happen. That's the thing. So hopefully you will. But remember, guys, if you are so inclined and you want us to be able to help candidates like Senator Rivera, patreon.com/generational change. We do contribute to non-corporate candidates running for office. We also do beach cleanups. We do homeless care packages. We do community gardens. We do a lot of things that are really about transforming politics into service.
And by the way, I am back to my community closet trailer idea again, like sort of working through that. I have a friend who's going to possibly help and work to see if I can get a grant. I have dreams of having a community closet in a trailer.
I could see that. You mean kind of like one of those, like the thing that Cat Uden has, like one of those type of trailers?
Kind
that
of,
only satisfy-
yeah,
Yeah.
a little bit bigger, something that looks like kind of like a nice boutique type thing that can show up at events and have like clothes for people for job interviews or for court or, you know.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. That really sounds good.
Yeah,
All right.
well, I know, but I need a grant.
Guys, patreon.com/generational change. For as little as $5 a month, let's help Jen get that community closet.
I do. I want a community closet.
So if you guys like that idea, wonderful. We'll have to bring it to Vosh's attention and some other people. We'll raise some money. I'll make some national contacts. And then hopefully we'll be able to make that. That is a really good goal to ascertain. I think.
Oh, it's perfect because it can have a finite amount. Like I can tell you how much it would cost to get it up and running. And then it's the kind of thing that could kind of finance itself. Because on the days when it was not served, like showing up and doing like, giveaways, we would use it and sell things from it to raise money for it.
Our chat seems to agree. But with that said, we appreciate you all. Remember, tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, regular time. Today was an exception for our two wonderful guests. But tomorrow we go back to our regular format, 8 p.m. We will first be speaking with Nomiki Kantz, and then we will be speaking with Matthew Ho at 9. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Bye, all.